Chapter 301. After Yi Xian entered a dense forest, his presence disappeared without a trace, as if he had never existed. Not long after Yi Xian disappeared, a bearded man appeared where Yi Xian had been standing. Looking at the corpse on the ground, the bearded man's face darkened. He glanced coldly at the surroundings. Damned human! As soon as his voice fell, he stomped his right foot. Boom! The earth shook violently, as if there was an earthquake. Yi Xian did not leave the Thousand Beast Mountain range, but continued to go deeper in. But the him now was not going in openly, but sneaking in. With the chaotic qi, even a true imperial law state practitioner would not be able to detect him. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian came to the depths of the Thousand Beast Mountain range, and in the depths of this vast mountain range, there was a city. Thousand Beast City. This city was huge, even bigger than Sky Cloud City. It should be said that this city was the biggest city in the Azure Firmament world. Just the city walls alone were a good few hundred feet high. Standing under the city walls, a person would be as tiny as an ant. But this was normal, because this city was not for humans, but for demonic beasts. Yi Xian sneaked into the city. There were very few buildings in the city, and it was very spacious. In this city, he saw all kinds of demonic beasts, some of them in human form, and some of them still in their original forms. Secretly, Yi Xian was in a dilemma. This city was so huge, if he were to search like this, it would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Sound transmission stone. Yi Xian thought of the sound transmission stone, but very quickly, he rejected the idea. The demon race would not be so stupid. Since they had imprisoned Xiangyu, they would definitely search him for his belongings. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian thought about it, and then went out of the city. In the next moment, a sword suddenly slashed on the walls of the Thousand Beast City. Boom! A corner of the city wall cracked, and the entire Thousand Beast City was shocked. Enemy attack? Countless demonic beasts rushed up the city wall. At the foot of the city walls, Yi Xian stood quietly, the long sword in his hand pointed diagonally at the ground. I am the Blue Sword Sex Yi Xian. I have come here today to seek some guidance from the younger generation of the Thousand Beast City. Under the augmentation of his celestial qi, his voice boomed out like thunder, and half of the Thousand Beast City heard it. Challenging the younger generation of the Thousand Beast City. On the city wall, countless demonic beasts roared in unison. Soon, a demonic beast charged towards Yi Xian. Below, Yi Xian was expressionless as he raised his sword and slashed down. Boom! Before the demonic beast could even get close to Yi Xian, it was directly blasted away by the force of Yi Xian's sword strike. Outside the city walls, Yi Xian said coldly, "Too weak. Show me something powerful." On the city walls, another demonic beast charged down. But just like before the demonic beast could even get close to Yi Xian, it was blasted away by the force of Yi Xian's sword strike. Just like that, after more than 10 demonic beasts were blasted away, the demonic beasts on the city walls did not come down anymore. Before the city gates, Yi Xian was expressionless. Why are there no more demonic beasts in the Thousand Beast Mountain range? Right at this moment, the ground suddenly trembled. In next to no time, a violent lion that emanated a dark glow suddenly charged out from within the city. This violent lion was enormous like a hill, and every single time it ran, the ground would tremble violently. When it was still several dozen feet away from Yi Xian, the ground around Yi Xian began to crack inch by inch. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Boom! Under the gazes of countless people, the wild lion retreated rapidly, and this retreat was no less than 200 feet. And when it stopped, its entire head split open, and blood gushed out like a fountain. This lion was at least at the Dharma-controlling realm, and the strength of its physique was imaginable. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's sword was even sharper. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. The lion stared at Yi Xian, its eyes filled with ferocity. It was about to attack again when a voice suddenly rang out from the city, "Stand down!" As the voice fell, a burly man with a curly beard appeared in front of Yi Xian. Dharma-controlling realm. The burly man looked coldly at Yi Xian. "You are Yi Xian." Yi Xian said indifferently, "That's me." The burly man said coldly, "You want to challenge my demon race?" Yi Xian grinned, "Can't I?" The curly-bearded man nodded, "Yes, of course you can. Since you want a challenge, then my monster race will play with you. Let my monster race see just how strong someone who can make the Realm Defense Alliance suffer a loss is." As his voice fell, he had already appeared on the city wall, and at this moment, a shadow suddenly shot out from the city. The speed of this afterimage was extremely fast. Everywhere it passed, the air would simply rupture, and even space itself would tremble. That was pure physical strength. Yi Xian did not underestimate his opponent. He took a step forward and stabbed down with his sword. One sword to decide life and death. This sword was also imbued with the evil will sword intent. At this moment, a fist landed on the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Boom! An explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. Then, the two figures retreated rapidly. Yi Xian retreated a full 30 feet, and 60 feet in front of him stood a man. This man was burly, and his muscles were bulging, filled with explosive strength. The man glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and in the next moment he stomped his right foot on the ground. The ground beneath Yi Xian's feet instantly cracked, and a wave of energy rushed towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian stabbed his sword into the ground. Boom! Beneath the ground, that wave of energy shattered, and countless gravel flew in all directions. At this time, the man had already appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he punched directly at Yi Xian's head. This punch caused the space in its path to distort. Yi Xian frowned, and in the next moment he dodged to the side, and at the same time he twisted his wrist, and the sword in his hand slashed directly at the man's abdomen. Bang! With this slash, Yi Xian felt as if his sword had struck a piece of dark iron, and his entire arm went violently numb. Shit! Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. He tapped his right foot lightly on the ground, and his figure floated backwards. Unfortunately, it was still slightly too late, and the man's fist had already smashed against his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's body arched as he flew over 100 m away. Yi Xian had just stopped when the man suddenly leaped up and arrived above Yi Xian's head, and then he smashed his fist down. It wasn't a martial technique, and it was just pure physical strength. A wisp of a savage smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and then he stomped his right foot on the ground and vanished. The 30 m kill. Bang! Along with the sound of an explosion, the man's figure retreated to the spot he stood on, and there was a sword stuck in his fist. The man had just stopped when a sword suddenly slashed out from the sword chest on Yi Xian's back. The sword was like a bolt of lightning. No, it was even faster than lightning. The man hadn't even reacted when the sword pierced through his shoulder, and the formidable force contained within the sword caused the man to retreat explosively over and over again until he reached the side of a wall. "I've lost." The curly-bearded man's face instantly sank when he witnessed this scene. Below the wall, Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the two swords flew back to him. He raised his head to look at the curly-bearded man and said, "Next. Take the next one." After a moment of silence, countless demon beasts roared furiously from above the wall. These demon beasts glared angrily at Yi Xian, and all of them revealed ferocious gazes as if they intended to swallow him up. However, no demon beast descended, nor did they besiege him. This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page. In the demon race, the strong were respected, and a one-on-one battle was a one-on-one battle. The curly-bearded man stared coldly at Yi Xian and said, "As you said." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and looked towards the depths of the city. "Come out." As soon as the curly-bearded man's voice resounded, a figure suddenly shot into the sky from within the city. In the next moment, this figure shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Its speed was so swift that it was comparable to Yi Xian's flying sword from before. Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and then a strand of formidable sword aura swept out from within him. The Sword Emperor's aura. This Sword Emperor's aura surged completely into the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Moreover, the sword in his hand had practically instantly turned pitch black. Evil sword intent. Yi Xian stabbed upwards from below. A sword howl resounded through the sky. Meanwhile, a fist smashed onto the tip of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! The ground beneath Yi Xian's feet collapsed, and the sword in Yi Xian's hand actually started to bend. Right at this moment, a sword suddenly flew out from behind Yi Xian. The man's expression changed drastically in midair, and he hurriedly withdrew his fist before pressing his palms together. This action actually forcefully stopped Yi Xian's sword. But right at this moment, a sword suddenly stabbed into the man's chest. It wasn't deep, and it was only around half an inch deep. Void flash. The surroundings quietened down. On the city wall, the curly-bearded man's expression was extremely gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. Below, the man above Yi Xian's head had retreated over 30 m away, and then Yi Xian waved his right hand, causing the two swords to fly back to him. The man glanced at Yi Xian. "Your sword is very fast." Yi Xian said, "Your strength is very strong." Physical strength. This man's physical strength was truly formidable. Needless to say, he couldn't underestimate anyone in the world. Even though he already had the ability to kill true Imperial Magic Realm experts, the firmament world was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Amongst the younger generation, there were many who could similarly kill true Imperial Magic Realm experts. There was always someone stronger in the world. The man glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. He bowed deeply to the curly-bearded man on the city wall. "I'm sorry." The curly-bearded man was expressionless. "You should be sorry to yourself." The man fell silent. The curly-bearded man waved his hand. "From today onwards, your cultivation will be doubled." The man smiled bitterly. He didn't say anything else and turned to leave. However, after a few steps, he stopped again and glanced at Yi Xian. "My name is Zhang Yuan. In the future, I will personally go to the Firmament Sword sect to challenge you." After he finished speaking, he entered the city. Outside the city wall, Yi Xian looked up at the curly-bearded man. "Is there anyone else?" The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian. "What exactly do you want to do?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "Previously, a disciple of my Firmament Sword sect came to the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, but now, there's no news of him. I believe that your demon race must know his whereabouts, right?" The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian coldly. "What if I say I don't know?" Yi Xian grinned. He pointed his sword at the curly-bearded man. "Come on, continue to call people out. Don't tell me that your demon race has no one in the younger generation." The curly-bearded man stared at Yi Xian. "I think you want to die." Yi Xian smiled. "Even the Realm Defense Alliance doesn't dare to kill me personally. Do your demon race dare?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" At this moment, in the distant city, a voice suddenly sounded. Then, a giant hand suddenly stretched out from the space above Yi Xian's head. The next moment, this giant hand directly fell towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and was about to summon the prison pagoda, but at this moment, end of this chapter. Chapter 302. A middle-aged man suddenly appeared before Yi Xian. The middle-aged man looked to be in his 30s, dressed in a gray robe, with a long sword sheathed at his waist. His left hand was behind his back, and his right hand was placed before his chest, holding a black stone in his hand. The middle-aged man glanced at the giant hand above his head, and in the next moment, the sword at his waist suddenly flew out. The skies! With a tearing sound, the giant hand above Yi Xian's head was split into two. So powerful! Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. This man's sword might be the strongest he had seen so far, besides the mysterious woman. Although the man had only struck once, but that one strike had given him a feeling, powerful. Very powerful. The middle-aged man glanced at the Thousand Beast City. When the younger generation can't win, the old ones step in. Don't you think it's embarrassing? As his voice fell, the middle-aged man's left hand pointed lightly. Swoosh! The sword at his waist suddenly flew out, extremely fast, and in an instant, it struck the Thousand Beast City's walls not far away. The sword fell, and the hundreds of feet tall city wall was slashed to the bottom by the sword, leaving a huge gap in the wall. Insolence! An angry roar suddenly rang out from within the Thousand Beast City. Very soon, a figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the city, and in the next moment, an old man appeared before the middle-aged man. It was an old man. The old man had a pair of long black horns on his head. The old man was about to strike when the middle-aged man suddenly said, "Go back." As his voice fell, his left hand's fingers drew a line in front of him. The sword struck. In the distance, the old man's face changed, and he threw out a punch. Boom! In the air, the space shook violently, and the old man flew out, flying straight back into the Thousand Beast City. The middle-aged man looked coldly at the Thousand Beast City. "A bunch of trash, the young won't do, the old won't do." As his voice fell, he suddenly pointed his fingers forward. Boom! In the distance, the gates of the Thousand Beast City crumbled. At that moment, countless powerful exponents suddenly shot up from various parts of the Thousand Beast Mountain Range and rushed towards the Thousand Beast Mountain Range. All of them were true Imperial Law Realm exponents. In the air, the middle-aged man looked around coldly. "Demon Clan, any demons come out to fight? Allow me." Right at this moment, a furious shout suddenly resounded from the north, and then a 300 long WM flashed through the sky and smashed directly towards the middle-aged man. His powerful physical strength caused the space in his path to distort. The momentum was terrifying. The middle-aged man took a step forward and placed the fingers of his left hand between his eyebrows. A sword quietly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the sword flew out like a bolt of lightning. As the sword flew out, it grew larger and larger. When it arrived in front of the flood dragon, it was already 1,000 feet long. The middle-aged man suddenly pointed his finger forward. "Kill!" Boom! In the distance, the flood dragon's body was directly split into two by the sword, and blood poured down from the sky like a waterfall. The air suddenly became quiet. After a moment of silence, over a dozen powerful auras appeared around Yi Xian and the middle-aged man. The weakest was at the true defensive Dharma realm. The middle-aged man was expressionless. The sword in the distance flew back to him and floated there quietly. The middle-aged man swept his eyes around. The older generation of the monster race is just like this? Impudent. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from behind the middle-aged man, and at this moment, from the Thousand Beast City in the distance, a voice suddenly rang out. "Stop." The voice was like a great bell, deafening. Below, Yi Xian trembled, and his head felt dizzy. He quickly displayed his sword intent to protect himself. The middle-aged man looked into the distant city. Inside the city, a middle-aged man in a white robe suddenly walked out. The white-robed middle-aged man smiled slightly. "Jian Xian, long time no see." "Jian Xian." Hearing these two words, the faces of the surrounding monster race experts changed. Practically all the experts of the older generation knew of these two words, because these two words had shaken the entire firmament world all those years ago. Jian Xian. That year, the first in the Azure world's martial roll, the only time the Celestial Sect did not get the first place was because of this person. In that era, even the peerless genius of the Celestial Sect was suppressed by Jian Xian of the Azure Sword Sect. And Jian Xian was also the person that the Realm Defense Alliance feared the most. In the air, Jian Xian looked coldly at the white-robed middle-aged man. "Beast King, let's exchange a few moves?" The Beast King shook his head and smiled. "If you and I fight without 10 days and 10 nights, we won't be able to determine the winner. There's no point in fighting." Jian Xian said softly, "Then let him go." The Beast King smiled. "Jian Xian, be honest, does your Azure Sword Sect really want to fight to the death with the Realm Defense Alliance?" Jian Xian was expressionless. "It's the Realm Defense Alliance that cannot tolerate my Azure Sword Sect, isn't it?" The Beast King shook his head and pointed to Yi Xian not far away. "The one that the Realm Defense Alliance is really afraid of is this person. If your Azure Sword Sect hands him over, won't this matter be over? At least for the time being. Isn't that right?" Below, Yi Xian faced the Beast King. "Senior, can I say a few words?" The Beast King looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Of course, why not?" Yi Xian smiled and said, If the Realm Defense Alliance has taken a liking to Senior's wife, in order not to anger the Realm Defense Alliance, wouldn't you have to offer your wife to the Realm Defense Alliance with both hands? The Beast King's eyes narrowed and his right hand slowly clenched. At this time, Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior Beast King, do you know about dignity and backbone? If we live without dignity and backbone, wouldn't we be worse than a dog? In the air, Xian glanced at Xian and did not say a word. The Beast King laughed lightly. You do have a backbone to dare to challenge my 1,000 Beast City alone, but do you really understand the Realm Defense Alliance? When your Azure Sword sect was at its peak, when your Azure Sword Master was still around, you were not able to destroy the Realm Defense Alliance. What more now? Xian suddenly said, there's nothing in this world that is difficult for those who set their minds to it. As long as I, Xian, do not die, sooner or later, I will wipe out the Realm Defense Alliance. To Xian, he and the Realm Defense Alliance were irreconcilable enemies. It did not matter if he could wipe out the Realm Defense Alliance, but he must show it. Anyway, there was nothing to lose even if he boasted. The Beast King gave a thumbs up to Xian. You're amazing, very amazing. Let me wait and see. As he said that, he glanced at Xian and said with a smile, since you've come out personally, this face must be given. Release him. Following the Beast King's order, Xiangyu was quickly brought out. However, when they saw Xiangyu, Xian and Xian's faces immediately darkened. Because at this moment, Xiangyu's aura was weak. Not only was his aura weak, his dantian was shattered and both his arms were severed. Seeing this scene, Xian turned to look at the Beast King. The Beast King smiled and said, if you want this Xian beside you to stay behind and end up like him, then feel free to make your move. Xian's face was terrifyingly cold, but the Beast King just laughed and turned to leave. At this moment, Xian suddenly said, do it. Hearing that, the Beast King stopped in his tracks. Everyone turned to look at Xian, including Xian, who was also looking at Xian. Xian's right hand gripped the sword in his hand tightly. Eldest uncle, do it. As for me, don't worry. Even the Realm Defense Alliance cannot kill me, what more a demon? Xian looked at Xian. You have the ability to protect yourself? Xian nodded. Xian nodded slightly. He turned to look at the Beast King not far away. You crippled one of my Pale Sword sect's younger generation, I will kill 100 of your demons' younger generation. No, I will wipe out the entire younger generation of your demon race. As his voice fell, he turned into a flash of sword light and rushed into the 1,000 Beast City. Seeing this scene, the Beast King's face changed. Insolent. As his voice fell, he rushed towards Xian. But Xian did not fight him. His target was the younger generation of the demon race. At this moment, the Beast King was a little flustered. He seemed to have thought of something and he suddenly roared, "Get rid of that Xian." Soon, more than 10 powerful auras from all directions rushed towards Xian. In his original position, Xian was expressionless, not moving nor escaping. P.S. To be honest, during the New Year period, there are not many people who can maintain 3 chapters. For someone so hardworking like me, don't you have anything to say? Just a little something will do. Chapter 303. Xian stood there quietly. Second floor god, are you going to make a move or not? You're really not coming out? I'm not. Fine, we break off our friendship. Break off our friendship then. Unable to get the second floor god to help, Xian had no choice but to take out the prison pagoda. Just as he was about to activate the prison pagoda, the second floor god suddenly said angrily, "Don't activate it." Xian said angrily, "If you don't activate it, are you waiting for death?" "That's right, don't activate it. I'm going to die." "You can't activate it even if you die." "I don't care." Xian was about to speak, but at this moment, a voice that Xian had never heard before resounded in the prison pagoda, "Let him activate it." Hearing this voice, Xian was stunned. Who the hell was this? Which floor was it from? Xian did not have time to think so much, because the pressure from the surrounding experts had arrived. Just as he was about to activate the prison pagoda, his body suddenly stiffened. At the same time, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were blue. Possessed. At this moment, Yi Xian felt that he was no longer in control of his body, but he could clearly feel everything, including the second-floor god. At this moment, the second-floor god was very angry. Very angry. Yi Xian coldly glanced around. The next moment, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and pressed down lightly. Boom! The entire sky suddenly shook violently. The next moment, the aura of the demon experts disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian coldly glanced around. At this moment, from the north, a huge fist flew across the sky, heading straight for him. Yi Xian bent his right hand into a claw and grabbed the air. Boom! The gigantic fist shattered with a loud bang. Then, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, a heart-wrenching scream resounded from the horizon. A great demon slowly fell from the sky, and Yi Xian actually opened his mouth and ate it. Within his body, Yi Xian's main body vomited. Guru on the second floor, don't King eat that. Use your main body to eat it. Damn, I'm so disgusted. Hurry up and stop. Although it was the Almighty on the second floor who was eating, it was his body. He could clearly feel that feeling. He was King eating them alive. The great god on the second floor didn't even bother about Yi Xian. In just a short while, a true tier great demon was eaten alive. At this moment, all the demon clan experts were dumbfounded. When did Yi Xian become so powerful? In the distance, the Beast King in the city also noticed this scene. He looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. How is this possible? At that moment, within the Thousand Beast City, screams and wails rang out incessantly. Hearing this, the Beast King's face changed. He roared in anger. Xian. As his voice fell, he rushed towards the city. At this moment, Xian was in the city slaughtering the younger generation of the demon clan. Not a single one was spared. On the other side, Yi Xian did not stop after eating the great demon alive. Instead, he looked around coldly. Low-level demon beasts. As his voice fell, he rushed towards the right. His speed was extremely fast. It was as if he had teleported thousands of feet away. When he arrived in front of one of the great demons, the latter didn't even have time to react and was sent flying by his claw. Just as Yi Xian was about to continue attacking, the prison pagoda suddenly shook violently. Yi Xian stopped. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. The great god on the second floor had returned to the pagoda. What's going on? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. The prison pagoda just now had made him a little flustered. After a moment of silence, the great god on the second floor suddenly said angrily, "You idiot!" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Can't you speak properly?" The great god on the second floor said angrily, "The seal is about to be lifted." Yi Xian was stunned. Then he hurriedly asked, "Which floor?" "All of them." The great god on the second floor almost roared. "All of them." Yi Xian froze in the air. This prison pagoda had a total of 9 floors. Now only 3 were open. That meant there were 6 more. If all 6 layers of the seal were loosened, then those fellows inside would all come out. Yi Xian didn't dare to think about it. Because those imprisoned here were basically not good people, including this great god on the second floor. None of them were good people. In the past, there was the mysterious woman to suppress them. Now, who would suppress them? Yi Xian hesitated. Then he said, "Why don't we throw the pagoda away?" The great god on the second floor said coldly, "Can you throw it away?" Yi Xian realized that he really couldn't throw it away. This prison pagoda was almost one with him now. Wait for that woman to come back. The great god on the second floor suddenly said. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Can we find the Tao law?" The great god on the second floor said coldly, "You have activated this pagoda time and time again. This pagoda is already seriously injured. Now that it is injured, the importance of the Tao law has become extremely small. If she doesn't come back in half a year, you can wait for death. Wait for death, wait for death, wait for death, wait for death, wait for death." Yi Xian hesitated. Then he said, "Great God on the second floor, isn't it good for you to lift the seal?" The second floor was silent. Yi Xian was about to ask. At this time, the great God on the second floor suddenly said angrily, "None of your business." Actually, Yi Xian didn't know what the great God on the second floor was afraid of. She wasn't afraid of this pagoda, nor afraid of those imprisoned in the pagoda. She was afraid of that mysterious woman. She was the first one to wake up and the only one who had a lot of contact with the mysterious woman. She knew more than Yi Xian how terrifying the mysterious woman was. She was also more aware of Yi Xian's position in the mysterious woman's heart. Those imprisoned in the pagoda didn't know that if anything happened to Yi Xian, that woman would go crazy. And once that woman went crazy, not only would all the imprisoned in the pagoda be finished, even the whole world would be finished. Moreover, most importantly, the mysterious woman had done her a favor. This was also the reason why she didn't like Yi Xian but still wanted to attack him. Yi Xian also knew that the great God on the second floor didn't like him, so he immediately asked, "Great God on the second floor, is there some misunderstanding between us? I think I'm quite a good person. Why don't you like me?" The great God on the second floor said coldly, "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Think about it, my ass." Ignoring the great God on the second floor, Yi Xian collected his thoughts. At this moment, there were still many great demons of the demon race looking at him. Obviously, those great demons didn't know that the great God on the second floor had returned to the pagoda. In the air, Yi Xian put his hands behind his back, his face expressionless. "Demon race, are there any great demons who want to fight with me?" The demon race experts around him had a look of fear on their faces. No one dared to make a move. Just now, Yi Xian had killed a great demon of the true Imperial Dharma realm in a second. That was an instant kill, and he had eaten it alive. Towards the current Yi Xian, no one was not afraid. In the air, Yi Xian suddenly shouted angrily, "Why, is there no one from the demon race? No one actually wants to fight with me?" At this moment, the curly-bearded burly man on the city wall appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was also a demon king of the demon race, and his strength was also at the true Imperial Dharma realm. The curly-bearded burly man stared at Yi Xian. "You are not Yi Xian." Yi Xian was expressionless. "Then who am I?" The curly-bearded burly man looked at Yi Xian for a long time, and finally his right hand slowly clenched. Seeing that the curly-bearded burly man was about to make a move, Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly, and he quickly said, "Fine, since you want to chat, then I will chat with you." The main body. Hearing this, the curly-bearded burly man frowned. "You really aren't Yi Xian." Yi Xian said, "Then do you know who I am?" The curly-bearded burly man glanced at Yi Xian. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian smiled, and as if he thought of something, he quickly asked in his heart, "Great God on the second floor, how do I address you?" The second floor was silent. Yi Xian shook his head, and just as he was about to bluff, the second floor suddenly said, "The Lord of the Illusory Demon Realm, Illusory Raccoon." Illusory Demon Realm? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he turned to the curly-bearded burly man not far away. "This lord is the Lord of the Illusory Demon Realm." Illusory Demon Realm? The curly-bearded burly man frowned deeply. "Never heard of it." As he said that, his expression suddenly changed. "You are not from the green firmament world." Yi Xian was just about to say something, and at that moment, the cry of a sword suddenly sounded from the Thousand Beast City in the distance. Very quickly, a city wall was cut down by a sword, and it began to crumble inch by inch. The curly-bearded burly man suddenly turned his head, his hands clenched tightly, but he did not dare to make a move. A battle of that level was not something he could participate in. At that moment, within the Thousand Beast City, countless sword lights flashed, and everywhere the sword lights passed, it turned into ruins. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelid twitched. Was the city going to be destroyed? Inside the city, a roar suddenly sounded, and very soon, a destructive power suddenly shot up from the city, straight towards Jian Xian. In the sky, Jian Xian was expressionless, his left hand pointed downwards. Swoosh! A ray of sword light slashed down, and the power was instantly shattered. But Xianxia did not stop. His left hand slashed diagonally to the right, and a ray of sword light cut across the sky. Swoosh! One side of the city wall was instantly split open, and within the city, countless screams rang out. So powerful! Yixian was extremely excited. This eldest uncle's battle prowess was terrifying. In the sky above the thousand-beast city, Xianxia stood quietly, his left hand pointed, and at the tip of his finger, there was a ray of sword light. Not far from him was the Beast King. At that moment, the Beast King's face was extremely ugly. Extremely ugly. The younger generation of the thousand-beast city had been almost completely slaughtered. If such a powerful exponent targeted the younger generation, there was no way to stop it, and the person in front of him was not just any ordinary exponent. In the Green Heavens world, there was an unwritten rule that the older generation could not target the younger generation. At that moment, the Beast King was feeling a little regretful, regretting listening to the Realm Defense Alliance and crippling Xianxia. But he really did not think that Xianxia would come out. And Xianxia, obviously, had no intention of stopping. He glanced at Yixian not far away. Seeing that Yixian was unharmed, he then turned to look at the Beast King not far away. "Today, I will destroy your thousand-beast city." As his voice fell, he was about to strike, but at that moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared not far away from Xianxia. The man was the Realm Defense Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu. Chapter 304. Realm Guard Alliance Supreme Lord Lu. Supreme Lord Lu glanced at Xianxia and said, "Xianxia, I never thought that you would come back after disappearing for so many years. Are you here to be buried with the Pale Sword sect?" Xianxia glanced at Supreme Lord Lu. "Destroy my Pale Sword sect? Your Realm Guard Alliance? Old man Lu, there is still the corpse of the previous Supreme Lord hanging at the foot of my Pale Sword sect's mountain. But don't worry, sooner or later, your corpse will also be hanging there." Supreme Lord Lu was not angry. "Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Let's see whether my corpse will be hanging at the foot of your Pale Sword sect's mountain, or the bodies of everyone in your Pale Sword sect will be hanging at the foot of my Realm Guard mountain." Xianxia sheathed his sword. "Then let's wait and see." After saying that, he grabbed the unconscious Xianxia and looked at Yixian. "Let's go." Yixian nodded and seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the Beast King not far away. "Beast King, for the sake of the Realm Guard Alliance, your demon race's younger generation has almost died, and even half of the city has been destroyed. Let me ask you, did you suffer a loss?" After saying that, he turned and flew into the sky on his sword. Soon, Yixian and Xianxia disappeared into the horizon. In the sky above the thousand-beast city, the Beast King's face was gloomy and grim. Plus, this time, it was a loss and a loss of blood. At this moment, Supreme Lord Lu suddenly said, "Beast King, in the future when the Pale Sword sect is destroyed, a third of their assets will belong to your demon race." Hearing this, the Beast King's face eased a little as he looked at Supreme Lord Lu. "When will you make your move?" Supreme Lord Lu smiled. "Soon. Once the matter in Green State is over, we will make our move immediately." The Beast King asked in a low voice, "How confident are you?" Supreme Lord Lu's mouth curled up. 70 to 80%. The Beast King thought for a moment and said, "Xianxia and Yixian aren't simple at all. Especially that young man Yixian. He's extremely mysterious." Lord Lu said softly, "Don't worry, his confidence comes from that mysterious woman. As for that mysterious woman, someone will deal with her in the future." The Beast King nodded and did not say anything more. He glanced down at the thousand-beast city below and his face darkened once again. This time, the demons had suffered a great loss. When they were about 10 miles away from the Tsang Sword sect, Xianxia suddenly stopped and handed Xianxia to Yixian. "Take him back." Yixian was stunned. "Eldest martial uncle, you're not going back?" Xianxia glanced in the direction of Azure Sword sect and shook his head. "I don't want to go back." As he spoke, he glanced at Yixian. "If there's nothing else, try not to leave the sect." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders and brought Xiangyu back to Azure Sword Sect. In the Azure Sword Hall, Chen Beihan looked at Xiangyu for a long time. In the end, he looked at the old man beside him. Is there a way to cure him? The old man walked up to Xiangyu and looked at him carefully before he nodded. His dantian is broken and he needs spiritual items to recover. The price is not small. Chen Beihan nodded. Cure him at all costs. The old man nodded. Understood. With that, he left the hall with Xiangyu. Chen Beihan looked at Yi Xian. What are your thoughts on this trip? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Our Azure Sword sect is in a bad situation. Chen Beihan smiled. Anything else? Yi Xian shook his head. Nothing else. He turned to Chen Beihan. Sovereign, forgive me for being blunt. Based on the current situation, our Azure Sword sect has no chance of winning. Especially those forces in the Azure Firmament world. Most of them will stand on the Realm Protection Alliance's side. As for us, we have no hope. Chen Beihan smiled. You still haven't looked far enough. Yi Xian said, Sovereign, please enlighten us. Chen Beihan smiled. In the Azure Firmament world, on the surface, the Realm Protection Alliance is the strongest. But below that, there are other strong forces. These forces have deep foundations that even the Realm Protection Alliance fears. For example, the Profound Gate. Yi Xian said in a low voice. They will deal with the Realm Protection Alliance? Chen Beihan smiled. They won't deal with the Realm Defense Alliance, but what the Realm Defense Alliance wants to do will seriously affect their interests. Yi Xian asked. Sovereign, do you know what the Realm Protection Alliance wants to do? Chen Beihan nodded. Do you really think that people like us eat rice for free every day? The Realm Protection Alliance's ambition is not small. He looked at Yi Xian. You need to make a trip back to Azure Province. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Chen Beihan spoke softly. Even though I don't know what their final objective is to stop the Realm Protection Alliance from obtaining the Origin Heart, it's obvious that everything they're doing is for the sake of the Origin Heart. Presently, the territory of Azure Prefecture is in utter chaos, and blood is flowing everywhere. The Origin Heart should be emerging soon, so you have to obtain it first. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Sect Master, I think that you'll have a better chance if you head there yourself. Chen Beihan shook his head. The Realm Protection Alliance will find out at the first possible moment if we leave the Firmament Sword sect. At that time, the Firmament Sword sect will probably cease to exist by the time we return. As for you, the Realm Protection Alliance won't be able to notice you at all if you sneak out, right? As he spoke, a spurious smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Obviously, Yi Xian's ability to conceal his aura hadn't been able to fool Chen Beihan. Yi Xian nodded. Then I'll head back. He had been in the Divine Central Continent for some time, and it was indeed time for him to go back and take a look. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said, Sect Master, I've seen my eldest martial uncle. Chen Beihan said softly, I know. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then chuckled. Sect Master, did my eldest martial uncle have a melodramatic fight with you over the position of Sect Master? Chen Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. It's not what you think. Your eldest martial uncle, this isn't something you should worry about. Previously, I was afraid that the Realm Protection Alliance would target your relatives in Qingzhou, so I sent junior brother Zhang Xian to Qingzhou to discuss things with him. He isn't someone who holds grudges. Yi Xian's heart warmed when he heard this. He nodded. I understand. With that, he bowed slightly and left the hall. Yi Xian didn't return directly to Qingzhou, but made a meal. Inside Cloudsword Hall, Yi Xian put a piece of lean meat in Yu Qi's bowl and grinned. Master, this is delicious. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. This time, you went to save Xiangyu, and dared to challenge the younger generation of the demon race in Thousand Beast City alone. The senior brothers are very satisfied with you. When you return, there will be a reward. Reward? Yi Xian hurriedly asked, What reward? Yu Qi shook his head. I don't know, but it shouldn't be too bad. She paused for a moment, then continued, Did you meet your eldest martial uncle? Yi Xian nodded. I did. Master, does eldest martial uncle have a grudge with the sect master? Yu Qi shook his head slightly. This matter is rather complicated. He should have been the sect master back then, but unfortunately, forget it, there's no point in telling you these things. Yi Xian. Moments later, after Yu Qi finished her meal, she flicked her finger and a ray of sword light suddenly entered between Yi Xian's eyebrows. This sword Qi was given to me by master, but to me, it's useless. You should keep it, it should be of great use. When you return, be careful. With that, she turned and returned to the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian tidied up and left Cloudsword Hall. He made a table of dishes and sent them to array Dao Peak. Seeing Yi Xian, the lady in the hall glanced at him, but didn't say a word and continued to embroider her things. Yi Xian chuckled. Senior Aunt Gu, I'll be returning to Qingzhou in a while. The lady nodded slightly, but didn't say a word. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then grinned. My trip will be a little dangerous. The lady glanced at Yi Xian, but still didn't say a word. Yi Xian was a little helpless. He bowed. Take care, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned and was about to leave. At this moment, a black box suddenly flew in front of him. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He quickly caught the box and turned to the lady. Senior Aunt Gu, this is? The lady said plainly, a temporary sword array, keep it for self-defense. Yi Xian quickly said, thank you, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned around and disappeared without a trace. In the hall, the lady shook her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. After Yi Xian left the Cloudy Sword Hall, he went to the weapon crafting peak. Obviously, everyone there knew him. Along the way, the disciples of the weapon crafting peak greeted him as senior brother. Yi Xian also greeted them back. Soon Yi Xian came to the belly of weapon forging peak and saw Zhan Tai. Yi Xian quickly bowed. Hello, Senior Aunt Zhan. Zhan Tai said plainly, what's the matter? Yi Xian chuckled. Nothing, I'm just here to see you, Senior Aunt. Zhan Tai was expressionless. If there's nothing, then go. I'm busy. But Yi Xian did not leave. He just stood there. Zhan Tai looked at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Martial Uncle Zhan, I'll be returning to Azure Prefecture this time to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the origin heart of Azure Prefecture. You're aware of this as well. I'm still so young, and I'm still so weak. Once I return, it will be dangerous. Zhan Tai nodded. It's quite dangerous. What should we do? Yi Xian rubbed his hands and smiled. That, Senior Aunt Zhan, you are the best weapon forging master in Azure Firmament World. You must have many treasures. That, do you have any good equipment that I can lend to junior nephew? I promise I will return it. Zhan Tai said plainly, no. Not even a single hair. Yi Xian sighed. Sigh, forget it. Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by heaven. Senior Aunt Zhan, I will take my leave. Finishing his words, he turned and walked outside. But Zhan Tai did not have any intention of stopping him. Yi Xian walked very slowly. Very, very slowly. Half a day passed and he did not walk out. Just at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He turned to face Zhan Tai. Senior Aunt Zhan, once I return, it will be very dangerous. Are you really not going to think about it? Zhan Tai shook his head and sighed. How can your skin be so thick? Chapter 305. An hour later, Yi Xian left Weapon Forging Peak. In his prison tower, there was an additional flying sword. Added with the graceful sword that Zhan Tai had custom-made for him, he now had a total of 2 flying swords. Moreover, they were both heaven tier. Now, he was completely unafraid of true defensive magic tier elites. He was elated. Just like that, Yi Xian left the Pale Sword sect contentedly. He didn't go to find Lu Banzwang or Ling Han. Now, he would cause trouble for whoever he went to. However, he didn't immediately return to Azure Province. Instead, he went to an ancient city called Drunken Immortal City. The headquarters of the Drunken Immortal Inn was here. The drunken immortal Inn wasn't listed as a super force in the divine central continent, but no one dared to underestimate them. Because they were rich. Very, very rich. Once they had a lot of money, it would be very useful. For example, they could invite elites from other realms. The Kuraki Academy had done this before. However, the price was a little high. Ordinary forces couldn't afford it. When Yi Xian arrived at the Drunken Immortal Inn, he immediately flashed his black card. Soon, an old man arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian had seen this man before. It was the third-floor master from before. Seeing Yi Xian, the third-floor master smiled slightly. "Young friend, long time no see. You're already a sword emperor." As he spoke, he paused slightly and then said, "How is your master?" Yi Xian smiled. She's fine." The mysterious woman was definitely fine. Who would dare to provoke her? The third-floor master made an inviting gesture. "Young friend, please sit." Yi Xian didn't stand on ceremony. After sitting down, he took a sip of tea and then said, "Third-floor master, to tell you the truth, I've come this time to sell some things." The third-floor master smiled slightly. "Naturally, no problem." Yi Xian nodded and then took out everything in one go. A huge pile. These were his spoils of war. Other than the few heaven-ranked treasures, the rest were useless to him. They were just taking up space, so he decided to sell them all. The third-floor master looked at the items in front of him and then looked at Yi Xian with a strange expression. Needless to say, these things were all robbed by this fellow. It was really a lot. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Third-floor master, how much can these things sell for?" The third-floor master sized up the items. "These items aren't worth much. They're worth around 1 billion or so top-grade spirit stones. Little friend, do you have anything good?" Yi Xian grinned. No, I'm very poor." The third-floor master shook his head and smiled. "How about this? I'll give you a favor. I'll give you 2 billion. Pack all these things up for me." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Isn't this senior coup?" The third-floor master laughed and said, "Talk about those things." Yi Xian smiled and said, 5 billion. It's settled then. It was best not to take advantage of such things. If he took too many advantages, no one would be willing to interact with him in the future. The third-floor master didn't say much. He pointed his finger and a storage ring flew in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't even look at it. He kept the storage ring and cupped his fists. "Third-floor master, I'll take my leave." The third-floor master smiled and said, "Take care." Yi Xian turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, the third-floor master went silent for a long time. Then he turned around and walked into an inner hall. In the inner hall, there was a black mirror. The third-floor master walked in front of the black mirror and bowed slightly. "I wonder if the floor master has made a decision." A moment later, a voice came out from the mirror. "Are you tempted by the Realm Defense Alliance's offer?" The third-floor master smiled bitterly. "I am tempted. Their offer is very tempting. However, I'm still a little hesitant." "Why are you hesitating?" the voice in the mirror asked. The third-floor master thought for a moment and said, "That youth isn't simple. If he continues to grow, he might become the second sword master. Furthermore, my drunken immortal building has a good relationship with him. If we were to betray the Realm Protection Alliance now, all our previous efforts would be in vain." A moment later, a voice rang out from the mirror again. "We will not help either side. As for business, whether it is the Realm Defense Alliance or that youth, as long as they come to us, we will do business with them. As for the rest, we won't interfere. If High Lord Lu comes again, just tell him that this is my intention. He will understand." The third-floor master bowed slightly. "Understood." After he finished speaking, just as he was about to turn around and leave, the voice from the mirror spoke again. "As for that young man, if it's possible, help him secretly. However, do not expose yourself." The third-floor master was stunned for a moment before nodding his head. "Understood." With that, he turned around and left. After leaving the Drunken Immortal Inn, Yi Xian did not linger and returned to Azure Province. This time, he didn't ride the cloud ship. Instead, he flew on his sword. In any case, he had enough top-grade spirit stones. Now, he had about 10 billion top-grade spirit stones in the prison pagoda. 10 billion. What did that mean? Besides that, there were many heaven-grade treasures. Returning to Azure Province this time could be considered as returning home in glory. Azure Province. The current Azure Province was in a state of desolation. Especially after the spirit energy in many places had dried up, it was even more desolate. The chaos in Azure Province wasn't just caused by the exhaustion of spirit energy and the invasion of foreign enemies, there was also internal strife. When disaster descended, the first thought of countless people was to protect themselves. As long as nothing happened to them, who cared about the fate of others? Moreover, Blue Waves Academy that had once fought for Azure Province had vanished without a trace. Now, many people had begun to reminisce about Blue Waves Academy. Because when Blue Waves Academy and Yixian were around, Azure Province still had some order. As for now, so long as one had the strength, one could do as they pleased in the entire Azure Province. The spirit energy in Azure Province was getting thinner and thinner. Those with strength and ability had begun to flee Azure Province and head for the Divine Central Continent. However, none of the students of Blue Waves Academy had left. They were all waiting for Yixian to appear. The nation of Ning. Because of Yixian, no cultivators of the Divine Central Continent had invaded the nation of Ning, mainly because they didn't dare. However, there were exceptions. On this day, a group of cultivators from the Divine Central Continent arrived outside the imperial city of the nation of Ning. The leader was a man with a knife scar on his left cheek. He had a long scar that looked like a centipede, and it was very ferocious. Behind him were more than 20 people. Most of them were at the Divine Combination realm. At this moment, an old man beside the scarred man said in a low voice, "The nation of Ning is Yixian's territory." The scarred man smiled savagely. "Yixian? I received news that Yixian has fled to the Divine Central Continent. Not only that, but the Realm Defense Alliance is also hunting him down. He doesn't dare show himself at all." The old man frowned deeply. "Brotherly, I think we'd better not provoke Yixian, especially when he's still alive." The scarred man said coldly, "Most of the places in Azure Province have been occupied by the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect. We've already looted most of the other places. Only the nation of Ning and the Great Cloud Empire are still considered wealthy. But Lien Wanli of the Great Cloud Empire is too powerful. The nation of Ning is the only one left." With that, he glanced at the people behind him. "After this, we'll all return to the Divine Central Continent. What do you think?" The people behind the scarred man were somewhat hesitant. Obviously, they were still somewhat afraid of Yixian. After all, Yixian had slaughtered countless cultivators of the Divine Central Continent outside the imperial city of the Jiang Nation. Seeing their hesitation, the scarred man's face darkened. "The timid will starve to death, and the bold will die. The nation of Ning is so wealthy. If we do this, we won't have to worry about food and clothing for decades to come." The old man beside the scarred man shook his head slightly. "Brotherly, the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect haven't attacked the nation of Ning. I think they're also afraid of Yixian. We really don't need to take this risk." The people behind the scarred man nodded. Although they all wanted to make a fortune, their lives were the most important. The scarred man's face grew even more unsightly at the sight of this. He glanced coldly at the crowd and said, "All right, let's cut the crap. Those who want to stay, stand behind me. Those who don't, leave immediately. However, don't blame me for not reminding you that the nation of Ning is very wealthy. Moreover, Lord Tuoba is only at the Dharma-controlling realm. There isn't even a law-controlling realm expert in the city. If you let this duck go, don't regret it in the future." Hearing the scarred man's words, some people behind him were tempted. The old man sighed in a low voice and said, "I've said what I should say. Brotherly, since you insist on going your own way, the old man doesn't want to say anything more. Anyway, I don't want to take this risk. Goodbye." After saying that, he turned around and left. Among the more than 20 people, 5 or 6 people also left with the old man. After hesitating for a moment, more than a dozen people finally chose to stay. Obviously, they were tempted by the wealth of the nation of Ning. The scarred man glanced at the people behind him and said with a smile, "The timid will starve to death, and the bold will die. As long as we finish this job, we'll immediately leave Qingzhou and hide. Even if Yi Xian is still here, what can he do to us? Follow me." After saying that, the group of people went straight to the imperial palace of the nation of Ning. When passing through the city gate, several guards suddenly stopped the scarred man and the others. The leading guard glanced at the scarred man and the others and said, "What do you want?" The scarred man revealed a savage smile. "What do we want?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly strode forward, and the guard didn't even have the chance to react before he slapped his palm against his chest. Bang! The guard's body instantly exploded into a mist of blood. The expressions of the other guards changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, but they didn't move forward because they would be giving their lives away. The scarred man's smile grew even more savage when he saw the guards retreat. "Brothers, it's time to change our destiny. Charge with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he was the first to charge forward. But it wasn't long before he stopped because a man was standing not too far away from him. The scarred man's expression instantly changed when he saw this man. "It's you. Weren't you at the Central Divine Prefecture?" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. The man before him was exactly Yi Xian. The scarred man hadn't even taken a few steps when Yi Xian appeared in front of him again. The scarred man's face instantly turned pale. In the next moment, his knees bent, and he knelt before Yi Xian. "Big brother, I was wrong." Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Recently, some readers have said that they want to curse me. It's fine. So long as they don't say I'm ugly, then they can curse me however they like. However, if they dare to say I'm ugly, then I won't hold back. Chapter 306. Yi Xian was stunned. He's terrified just like that? And at this moment, the knife-scarred man who was kneeling in front of Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He dashed forward and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then, with a dagger in his hand, he slashed at Yi Xian's throat. He was extremely swift. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled when he saw the scarred man suddenly attack. So that's what he's trying to do. Unfortunately, he's greatly underestimated my strength. It didn't take long for the scarred man to stop, and there was a sword in the center of his forehead. When they saw this scene, the other group of over 10 turned around and fled. However, a flying sword suddenly flew out, and it was like a butterfly flying through flowers as it passed through the group of over 10 people. In just a breath of time, the heads of over 10 people flew up into the air. It was an extremely bloody scene. The scarred man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Weren't you at the Central Divine Prefecture?" Yi Xian grinned. "I just returned. Are you angry?" The scarred man's expression instantly turned extremely unsightly when he heard Yi Xian. He just returned. In that case, he just made it in time. This was the worst luck of 8 lifetimes. The scarred man thought for a moment and said, "I admit defeat this time. So long as you're willing to spare my life, then I." Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword suddenly moved forward. The sword instantly pierced through the scarred man's forehead. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "You're overthinking things." As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew his sword, turned around, and left. The scarred man's eyes were wide open on the spot, and he died with everlasting regret. After Yi Xian entered the city, he hadn't even taken a few steps before he stopped. 2 women were standing not too far away from him. It was Tuoba Yen and Jianji. Yi Xian ran up to the 2 girls as soon as he saw them. Then he hugged them. "I missed you so much." The 2 women's bodies stiffened. Obviously, they did not expect Yi Xian to act like this. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly pushed Yi Xian away and glared fiercely at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said with a straight face, "This is a pure hug, no other thoughts." Jianji suddenly asked, "Are there any impure ones?" Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian followed the 2 women back to the Ning Kingdom's imperial palace. Inside Tuoba Yan's chamber, Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. Azure Province is getting more and more chaotic. Yi Xian nodded slightly. The Realm Defense Alliance wants to obtain the Green Prefecture's origin heart. Once they obtain the Green Prefecture's origin heart, the Green Prefecture's spiritual energy will completely disappear within a year. At that time, the situation was even worse than now. Tuoba Yen frowned deeply. Is the Realm Protection Alliance really going to destroy the Azure Province? Yi Xian nodded. The Azure Province is worthless in their eyes. With that, he paused slightly and continued, a senior once told me that the stronger some people are, the less human they are. Because to them, apart from the great Tao of immortality, everything else is fleeting. This kind of people no longer have any humanity, only divinity. This was what the mysterious woman said to him. In fact, he could feel that the mysterious woman did not care about many things. At her level, there should be very few things that could make her care. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly said softly, "Will you become such a person in the future?" Ji Anji looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned. If I had the mysterious woman's strength, would I also become indifferent to everything? After thinking for a moment, Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. I don't know, but I will try my best not to become such a person. The great Tao, immortality, these were things he had never thought about before. Before he left Azure City, his greatest wish was to cure his younger sister's cold illness and make her happy. Of course, after he left, he had experienced many things, met many people, and had many more thoughts. If he reached the peak one day but the people by his side were gone, then it would be the peak of loneliness. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian suddenly turned to the two women and smiled. I feel that problems will arise when one lives for too long. Because we're free. So, don't care about the great Tao of immortality. Living well in the present is the most important thing. Tuoba Yen shook his head with a smile, but it's difficult for us to live well right now. Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked to the entrance of the hall. He just stood there, and no one knew what he was thinking. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian and did not speak. After a short while, Yi Xian said softly, I'm leaving. Tuoba Yen stood up. So soon? Yi Xian smiled. You can't bear to? Tuoba Yen glared at Yi Xian. Why is your skin getting thicker and thicker? Yi Xian laughed, walked over to Ji Anji, and then flipped his right hand, and a saber appeared in his hand. It was the heaven-grade saber. Ji Anji was stunned when he saw the saber, and then he took it with eyes filled with fondness. Heaven-grade. Such a treasure was undoubtedly an extremely rare existence in Azure Province. What about me? Tuoba Yen suddenly asked. Yi Xian smiled, and then he gave the heaven-grade armor that he was wearing to Tuoba Yen. His current opponents were either at the true defensive magic realm or above, so this armor was not that useful to him anymore. Tuoba Yen was stunned when he saw the armor that Yi Xian handed over, and then he shook his head. Keep it for yourself. Yi Xian forcibly placed the armor in Tuoba Yen's hand. For me, this thing is not that useful anymore. With that, he waved his right hand, and over 20 zombies suddenly appeared in the hall, all of them at the Myriad Law realm. Yi Xian took out a spatial ring and handed it to Tuoba Yen. There is a decaying corpse scripture in the spatial ring. You have to study it. With these zombies and my 12 golden men, as long as true defensive magic realm experts don't come, Ning country should be safe. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. You're not staying here? Yi Xian chuckled. If I stay here, where will I sleep? Hearing this, Tuoba Yen looked provocatively at Yi Xian. Where do you want to sleep? Yi Xian said seriously, On the bed, of course. Tuoba Yen said indifferently, Then sleep on the bed. Yi Xian laughed, and so he stayed. At night, Yi Xian once again came to Tuoba Yan's bedroom. Since Tuoba Yen wanted him to sleep on the bed, he naturally did not stand on ceremony and went straight to the bed. But soon he was stunned. Because there were two people on the bed. In addition to Tuoba Yen, there was also Ji Anji. Two people. Tuoba Yen sat up and looked at Yi Xian with a spurious smile. Didn't you want to sleep? Come on up. The provocation was self-evident. How could he back down? Yi Xian said seriously, Since you strongly requested it, then I'm coming. With that, he jumped onto the bed and lay down between the two women. The two women were stunned. He really came up. Yi Xian held one in each hand and said seriously, "Sleep." On Yi Xian's left, Tuoba Yan's face was full of black lines. Clearly, she had underestimated the thickness of Yi Xian's skin. This guy's skin was thick to this extent. On the other hand, Jianji was still eating and did not say anything. Just like that, Yi Xian hugged one woman on each side. At first, it was quite satisfying, but soon, it became a little torturous. Holding two great beauties in his arms and not being able to do anything, it was very torturous. Late at night, Jianji was already asleep, but Tuoba Yan did not fall asleep because Yi Xian's hand was touching somewhere it should not be touching. Tuoba Yan grabbed Yi Xian's hand and warned, "Don't move." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm not moving. I'm serious." Tuoba Yan glared at Yi Xian. "Anji is still here." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm not afraid." Tuoba Yan. Another hour passed. At this time, Tuoba Yan's breathing was a little rapid. Because she had a special physique, and now that Yi Xian's hand was restless, her body, which had a special physique, was starting to, at this moment, Tuoba Yan suddenly hugged Yi Xian. Yi Xian was shocked because he discovered that Tuoba Yan's body was burning like fire. Yi Xian hurriedly turned to the side and asked softly, "What's wrong?" Tuoba Yan hugged Yi Xian tightly and buried her head in Yi Xian's chest, her body trembling slightly. Yi Xian was about to say something when Tuoba Yan's pajamas suddenly slipped. At the same time, her hand touched a forbidden area for men, intolerable. Therefore, Yi Xian blocked the world prison pagoda and gave her a taste of her own medicine. As the saying went, love in the middle of the night, two bodies as one, the golden spear fighting fiercely, the sweet dew dripping on the head of an inch of heart. That night, he did not sleep, moving and trembling as he entered the immortal boat. That night, he did not sleep, nor did he rest. Daybreak. The person on the bed had yet to get up. It was not until noon when the sun rose that Yi Xian sat up. At this moment, he was the only one on the bed. Comfortable. Comfortable all over. It was as if his meridians had been cleansed. Yi Xian clicked his tongue in wonder. Could doing this kind of thing really help him cultivate? Last night, the two of them were still immersed in that. Later on, the two of them decided to try the yin-yang meridian that he had once achieved. As for the feeling, it was still very wonderful, but both of their bodies had changed a little. But in that situation, the two of them did not care so much. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian washed up and left the sleeping quarters. Then he came to the main hall. At this moment, Tuoba Yan was attending the morning court session. At this moment, Tuoba Yan was dressed in a dragon robe and had an invisible majesty between his brows. He was a completely different person from last night. Seeing Yi Xian arrive, Tuoba Yan put down the memorial in his hand. Court dismissed. Soon, the officials retreated. In the hall, only Yi Xian and Tuoba Yan were left. Tuoba Yan was expressionless and did not speak. Yi Xian walked in front of her and said with a smile, "I'm going to leave. As for the Ning Kingdom, you don't have to worry. There are already powerhouses secretly guarding it. However, when necessary, I hope you can hide. Of course, I'm talking about when you have no other choice." Tuoba Yan said solemnly, "The Realm Defense Alliance?" Yi Xian nodded. "The Realm Defense Alliance will make a big move soon. Before that, I have to go and stir up some trouble." Tuoba Yan was silent for a moment and then said softly, "Be careful." Yi Xian smiled and then leaned over to Tuoba Yan's ear. "Do you still have that medicine? Give me some for self-defense." Tuoba Yan. Chapter 307. Tuoba Yan kicked Yi Xian angrily. Yi Xian laughed. After coaxing and pestering, he finally got a few white jade bottles. After getting what he wanted, Yi Xian did not stay and left Ning Kingdom. The Realm Defense Alliance should already know about his return to Azure Province. If he stayed in Ning Kingdom now, it would be disadvantageous to the country. After Yi Xian left, Jianji suddenly appeared in the hall. Seeing Jianji, Tuoba Yan seemed to think of something and blushed. Ji Anji sized up to Oba Yen and was a little surprised. Dharma Defense Realm? Tuoba Yen nodded. Ji Anji was a little incredulous. You were still at the Dharma Defense Realm yesterday. Why are you at the Dharma Defense Realm today? Tuoba Yen was about to speak when Ji Anji suddenly said, Was it because of your dual cultivation last night? Hearing this, Tuoba Yen's face suddenly turned red like a burning cloud. She glared at Ji Anji angrily. Ji Anji said softly, The commotion was too big. It woke me up. Tuoba Yen, Ji Anji asked again, Was it really because of dual cultivation? Tuoba Yen hesitated for a moment and nodded. It was indeed because of dual cultivation. Last night, after dual cultivation, she discovered that she had inexplicably improved. This improvement was too unexpected. Seeing Tuoba Yen nod, Ji Anji nodded slightly, appearing to be in deep thought. No one knew what he was thinking. After leaving Ning Kingdom, Yi Xian arrived at Great Cloud Empire on his sword. In the palace of Great Cloud Empire, Yi Xian saw Lien Wanli. At this moment, Lien Wanli's arm had recovered. Seeing Yi Xian, Lien Wanli smiled slightly. Long time no see. Yi Xian said with a smile, Not too long. Lien Wanli glanced at Yi Xian. Walk with me. In the Imperial Garden, on the gravel Xiao Dao, the two walked side by side. It was very quiet. The surrounding experts of Great Cloud Empire had already retreated stealthily. After a while, Lien Wanli suddenly said, This Azure province should not be able to be saved, right? Yi Xian nodded. The Realm Defense Alliance will soon seize the Azure province's origin heart. Once they take away the Azure province's origin heart, the entire Azure province's world energy will dry up in a short period of time. At that time, this land will no longer be suitable for cultivators to live in. Lien Wanli turned to look at Yi Xian. Can you stop it? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. That's hard to say. However, no matter what, I will do my best to prevent this Qingzhou origin heart from falling into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. He didn't know what the Realm Defense Alliance wanted the origin heart for, but he knew that nothing good would happen. Lien Wanli said softly, These powerhouses don't treat people as humans too much. Yi Xian was about to say something, but suddenly he said with some surprise, Dharma defensive state? Lien Wanli smiled faintly, I just arrived not long ago. Now, even if I encounter a Dharma defensive state expert, I can still kill him. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Others said that he, Yi Xian, was a monster, but in fact, the real monsters in Azure Province were Xiao En and Lien Wanli. Especially Lien Wanli, this was a person who was seriously underestimated. After a while, Lien Wanli suddenly stopped. She squatted down and saw a row of ants slowly crawling on the ground. Lien Wanli said softly, In the eyes of those high and mighty cultivators of the Realm Protection Alliance, we are just like these ants. Saying that, she looked up at Yi Xian. After this matter, I'm going to focus on martial Dao. My goal is to reach the Supreme Realm for the time being. Yi Xian said with a smile, Let's do it together. Lien Wanli smiled faintly, Do it? 2 hours later, Yi Xian left the Great Cloud Empire and came to a small city. In the city, he walked to a tavern where an old man with a long sword on his back was sitting. Yi Xian walked behind the old man and bowed slightly, Greetings, martial uncle. The person in front of him was Zhang Xian, who Chen Beihan had sent to protect the people around him. Zhang Xian nodded, Sit. Yi Xian sat opposite Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian glanced at him, Is everything done? Yi Xian nodded, Almost. Zhang Xian nodded. The Realm Protection Alliance will be making a move soon, and there are signs of the origin heart appearing in the secluded desolate mountain range. Yi Xian said in a low voice, This matter is of great importance. The Realm Protection Alliance will definitely send many experts, right? Zhang Xian said, Even Supreme Lord Lu will come personally. Supreme Lord Lu. Yi Xian's face darkened. This person was an expert above the True Defense Law stage. Although he could kill True Defense Law stage experts, he was still no match for a top expert like Supreme Lord Lu. At this moment, Zhang Xian said, Don't worry, the sect master will personally hold Supreme Lord Lu back. Leave the rest to us. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you want a decisive battle?" Song Xian smiled, "More or less. In short, the origin heart must not fall into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. This time, the sect master did not ask you to stop the Realm Protection Alliance, but to train you. Of course, given your current strength, you will be of great help." Yi Xian nodded. Understood. As long as it was to cause trouble for the Realm Protection Alliance, Yi Xian was willing to do it. Song Xian nodded. "Go to the secluded desolate mountain range first, don't go out in the open, then hide and wait for an opportunity. As for your family in Qingzhou, don't worry, the sect has sent people to secretly protect them." Yi Xian stood up and bowed. "Martial uncle, martial nephew will take his leave first." With that he turned and left the tavern. After leaving the small city, Yi Xian headed straight for the secluded desolate mountain range. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived at the secluded desolate mountain range. When he arrived, his expression suddenly changed. All the trees in the entire mountain range had withered, and the ground had cracked open, with waves of heat seeping out from the cracks. He did not expect that many places in Qingzhou had reached such a level. If the Realm Protection Alliance seized the origin heart, the entire Qingzhou would undoubtedly become like this. At that time, Qingzhou would no longer be able to produce new martial artists, because there would be no spirit qi. A moment later, Yi Xian entered the mountain range. This time, he had completely concealed himself, so no one could discover him. Not long after Yi Xian walked, he stopped and said, "Guru on the second floor, can you sense the heart of origin?" After a moment of silence, the second floor expert suddenly said, "Not interested." "Not interested?" Yi Xian's face darkened. How could he not be interested? He hurriedly said, "The origin heart must not fall into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. Second floor expert, if you can feel it, we can go and get it first." "Not interested." This was the second floor expert's answer. "There are benefits," Yi Xian said. "What benefits?" the second floor expert suddenly asked. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. "What benefits do you want?" Bang. At this moment, the second floor of the prison tower suddenly shook violently, and then an angry roar came from the second floor, "Let me out." Yi Xian. In all fairness, he really did want to let this god on the second floor out. Although this guy was a little hot-tempered, he was still all right. He wasn't particularly bad. The problem was, without the second layer of the Tao Law, he could not do anything. After a moment, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Second floor expert, you also know that I have no way to open the second layer of the seal. How about this? When things here are over, I will find the second Tao Law and let you out. When that time comes, you can go wherever you want. What do you think?" The second floor expert was silent for a moment, then said, "You big hoodwinker." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Second floor expert, you have to speak with a conscience. When have I, Yi Xian, ever hoodwinked my own people?" This time, the second floor expert did not speak. This was because after following Yi Xian until now, she realized that although Yi Xian was usually a little slippery, he was very good to his own people. After a moment, the second floor expert suddenly said, "Underground." "Underground?" Yi Xian was delighted and hurriedly asked, "You mean the heart of the origin source is underground?" The second floor expert said, "Yes." Yi Xian asked again, "Where is it?" After a moment, the second floor expert said, "Its aura is erratic, we have to find it." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Naturally, he knew that the heart of the origin source was underground, but the problem was, if he did not know the exact location, how could he find it in such a large underground place? At this moment, the second floor expert said again, "Trick it out." Trick. Yi Xian's expression froze. How could he trick it? The second floor expert did not speak. After a moment, Yi Xian sighed softly. This second floor expert was a little unreliable. Did he really think that Yi Xian's mouth was invincible and could do anything? Yi Xian thought for a long time. In the end, he still decided to give it a try. Who knows, he might really trick it out. Yi Xian sat on the ground. He patted the ground and said, "Well, I think you should be able to hear me. Just like this, The Realm Defense Alliance is waiting for you to come out. If you come out, they will definitely capture you, and then, your end will be very, very miserable. Of course, it's useless if you don't come out, they will force you out. At this point, he paused slightly and then said, "If you believe me, come out and follow me. Don't worry, I will never hurt you, and I will not let the Realm Defense Alliance hurt you." After that, Yi Xian waited quietly. However, there was no movement. At this moment, the second-floor expert suddenly said, "I'm afraid you are a fool." Yi Xian, the second-floor expert suddenly said angrily, "Tell it that there are benefits, understand? Benefits." Yi Xian suddenly understood. That's right, if there were no benefits, why would it follow him? Thinking of this, Yi Xian quickly said, "If you follow me, not only can you keep yourself safe, but you can also have whatever you want." After that, Yi Xian waited. However, there was still no movement. Yi Xian said indifferently, "Second-floor expert, look, your method is useless." At this time, an illusory beast suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the second-floor expert. However, it was not her real body. The second-floor expert looked coldly at Yi Xian, and the next moment, she slammed her claw on the ground, "Come out or not." Boom. The whole ground shook violently. At this time, the second-floor expert slammed her claw down again, and said angrily, "Come out or not." Boom. The whole ground collapsed. Yi Xian. P.S. A reader invited me to wash her feet, and as I was washing, the girl asked the handsome guy, "Do you need any other service? I really don't understand what she means. Also, I don't know why the brother took me to wash her feet instead of taking me to eat. In your eyes, am I such a person?" Chapter 308. Yi Xian was dumbfounded at the sight of the angry guru on the second floor. Was this girl crazy? She had such a bad temper. Just as the second-floor guru continued to slap the ground, a ball of white light suddenly appeared in front of her. This was? Yi Xian was stunned. The second-floor guru glanced at Yi Xian. "She's out." After saying that, she disappeared directly. She was out? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He quickly looked at the ball of white light. In the white light, there was a fist-sized little girl. The little girl was very, very small, wearing a small white doo-doo, and behind her head were two small whips. At this moment, her two little hands were clenched tightly, and she was glaring at Yi Xian. Yi Xian spread his hands. "I didn't do it." The little girl suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "Human, damn human, you destroyed the earth, destroyed the heaven and earth spiritual energy. You will suffer retribution." Yi Xian said seriously, "I really didn't do this." With that said, he walked towards the little girl, and at this moment, a white light screen blocked in front of him. The little girl looked at Yi Xian warily. "Don't come over, or I'll kill you." Yi Xian squeezed out a smile. "I'm not a bad person." The little girl glared at Yi Xian. "Bad people always say they're not bad. You have a strong murderous intent. You must have killed many people." Yi Xian. The little girl looked around warily, and then said, "Where's that little girl just now?" Second-floor guru. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then pointed to his chest. "She went inside." The little girl looked at Yi Xian's chest, and the next moment, she flew into a rage. "Human! Do you think I'm as stupid as you? I'm the invincible, the most invincible, the smartest heart of Qingzhou." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Was this a demon? The little girl still wanted to say something, but the Almighty on the second floor suddenly appeared again. It had to be said that the second-floor god's appearance was very cute, especially his pair of crystal blue eyes, which were extremely beautiful. Unfortunately, his temper was 2F** king explosive, exploding at the slightest provocation. Seeing the god on the second floor, the little girl let down her guard. She floated in front of the god and begged, "Can you protect me?" Obviously, she had witnessed the strength of the second floor's Almighty. The Almighty on the second floor glanced at the little girl and then pointed at Yi Xian. "He can do it." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. "Too weak. You can't even beat me." Yi Xian was speechless. The Almighty on the second floor pointed at Yi Xian's chest. It's safe inside. The little girl glanced at Yi Xian's chest and blinked. Can I go in? The Almighty on the second floor nodded. The little girl floated in front of Yi Xian and then hugged Yi Xian, trying to push her head against Yi Xian's chest. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get in. Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl turned to look at the Almighty on the second floor, her eyes full of doubt. She can't. The Almighty on the second floor looked at Yi Xian. Let her in. Yi Xian hesitated for a while and then said, Can I go in? He had never pretended to be a living person before, and he didn't dare to because the mysterious woman had told him that if a living person went in, the prison pagoda would automatically defend itself and kill the other party. The Almighty on the second floor looked at the little girl. She's not human. The little girl blinked. Am I not human? The Almighty on the second floor asked, Are you? The little girl looked at her body and then said, I think I am. The Almighty on the second floor was expressionless. That's just what you think. Hurry up and go in. The little girl still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian and the Almighty on the second floor's faces suddenly changed. The next moment, the Almighty on the second floor disappeared from the spot, and Yi Xian hurriedly grabbed the little girl and sent her into the prison pagoda. Less than a breath's time after the little girl and the Almighty on the second floor disappeared, an old man suddenly appeared in the sky above Yi Xian. The person who came was Yi Xian's old acquaintance, Mo Xiu. Seeing Yi Xian, Mo Xiu's brows furrowed. It's you! Yi Xian chuckled. Elder Mo, long time no see. You're getting younger and younger. Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, did you see something? What? Yi Xian frowned. See what? Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian looked around. Is there something here? Mo Xiu asked in a low voice. What are you doing here? Yi Xian grinned. Guess. Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian for a long time, then smiled and said, Yi Xian, your good days are coming to an end. Also, your blue sword sect's good days are also coming to an end. Once we get our hands on the origin heart of Qingzhou, you will realize how foolish it is to go against my realm defense alliance. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders. Wait until I finish cultivating my divine art. At that time, you will discover that targeting me, Yi Xian, was the stupidest decision your realm protection alliance has ever made. Saying this, he grinned. Who doesn't know how to boast? Saying this, he turned around and left. Mo Xiu did not stop Yi Xian, because he knew that he could not stop him. Yi Xian. Regardless of whether he was willing to admit it or not, Yi Xian wasn't someone that a true Imperial Magic Realm expert could kill now. At the very least, an ordinary true Imperial Magic Realm expert couldn't. After Yi Xian left, a few old men suddenly appeared by Mo Xiu's side, and one of them said in a low voice, We sensed the aura of the origin heart earlier, but we didn't notice anything after arriving here. How strange. As he spoke, he glanced at the direction Yi Xian had left. That person is slightly strange. Mo Xiu spoke indifferently. He's always been strange. The old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Then could the Qingzhou's origin heart have already? Mo Xiu shook his head. Absolutely impossible. The origin heart is extremely vigilant, and it's impossible for it to easily trust humans. Moreover, with Yi Xian's strength, it's impossible for him to capture it and take it away without making a sound. Moreover, there are no signs of a battle here. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let him go. The old man thought for a moment, and then he nodded. Indeed. If he was able to obtain the origin heart so easily, then it would be too unreasonable. However, his aura is strong, and he's even a sword emperor. Even if his potential isn't as great as the firmament sword master from all those years ago, it isn't much inferior. If it's possible, then it's best to eliminate him as soon as possible. Mo Xiu nodded slightly. Don't worry, the Exalt has a plan. So long as we obtain the origin heart, then we'll immediately annihilate this person and the firmament sword sect. Now, we'll let them have their fun today. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The old man and the others turned around and left as well. On the other side, After Yi Xian found a place with no one around, he immediately entered the World Prison Pagoda. Within the pagoda, a little girl was looking all around the first level, and her eyes were filled with curiosity. As he gazed at the palm-sized little girl before him, Yi Xian was slightly amused. He hadn't expected that the Qingzhou's origin heart would actually be such a little girl. The little girl looked curiously for a long time, and then she suddenly smiled in the end. Her smile was extremely brilliant and extremely happy. Yi Xian was a little curious. "What are you smiling at?" The little girl looked at Yi Xian and blinked her eyes. "Safe, it's safe here. Finally, I don't have to hide everywhere. And I'll be staying here from now on. Help me get some food, I want some spiritual fruits. Very, very big, very sweet ones." As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. With a wave of her hand, a large pile of crystals fell in front of Yi Xian. Purple source crystals. There were more than 1,000 of them. Moreover, these purple source crystals were extremely big, at least twice the size of the ones he had obtained before. The little girl looked at Yi Xian. "These are all for you. Go and get me something to eat." Yi Xian gulped, and then kept all the purple source crystals without batting an eyelid. Following that, he nodded his head. Okay, I'll go get them now. If you have any other requests, feel free to tell me. Don't stand on ceremony. Really, don't stand on ceremony. Little girl. Chapter 309. More than 1,000 purple source crystals. Yi Xian really did not expect this little girl to be so rich. Resource crystals were something that even a true defensive magic realm expert needed. Moreover, above the Dharma realm, the common currency among experts was the purple source crystal. This was because resource crystals had enough spiritual energy and were extremely useful. On the contrary, things like top-grade spirit stones were not so useful to experts above the Dharma realm. Of course, top-grade spirit stones were also very useful, because top-grade spirit stones were needed to nurture newcomers. Purple source crystals were too precious. Before reaching the Dharma realm, it would be a waste to use them. Inside the pagoda, the little girl no longer paid attention to Yi Xian. She strolled left and right until she reached the second floor. Even Yi Xian did not know how she got there. And Yi Xian also discovered that the prison pagoda did not reject this little girl at all. Although this little girl was a little wary of Yi Xian, for some reason, she was not wary of the great god on the second floor. This made Yi Xian extremely depressed. Was he more terrifying than the great god on the second floor? Yi Xian no longer paid attention to the little girl and left the desolate mountain range. It had to be said that Yi Xian did not expect to obtain the Qingzhou origin heart on this trip. One must know that the Realm Protection Alliance had been fighting for the Qingzhou origin heart for a very long time. For the sake of the Qingzhou origin heart, the Realm Protection Alliance could be said to have racked their brains. If the Realm Protection Alliance knew that the Qingzhou origin heart had fallen into his hands so easily, who knew if they would die of anger? Of course, he naturally would not be stupid enough to tell others about this. If he did, the Realm Protection Alliance would definitely go crazy and come after him. After leaving the desolate mountain range, Yi Xian decided to return to Jiang country to take a look. Because he had not been back for a long time. Jiang country's imperial capital. Yi Xian arrived at the gate of Jiang country's imperial capital. The gate was broken and the city walls were in a mess. Moreover, there was the smell of blood and rotting corpses. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before walking in. There were very few people in the city, and rotten corpses could be seen everywhere. There were also new corpses and broken limbs everywhere. Yi Xian walked all the way to Blue Waves Academy. It was still the former Blue Waves Academy, but there was no one there. Someone was there. Yi Xian arrived at the peak of the Blue Wave Palace. And inside the Blue Wave Palace, Yi Xian discovered some people. Not only the Blue Wave Palace, but all the other palaces on the mountain had people. Yi Xian walked into the Blue Waves Palace. There were at least 100 people inside the palace and some of them were still sleeping. When they saw Yi Xian walk in, some people only glanced at him before withdrawing their gazes. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, "What are all of you doing here?" Everyone looked at him, but no one answered. At this moment, a man walked out. He was about 20 years old and had a roguish air. The man walked to the front of Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. "Are you also here to seek asylum?" "Seek asylum?" Yi Xian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The man smiled. "What do you mean? You don't know? My Blue Waves Academy's dean, Yi Xian, said that as long as you pay the best quality spirit stones, you can come to my Blue Waves Academy and receive my asylum. You see, Qing province is in chaos now, but no one dares to invade my Blue Waves Academy." Hearing this, Yi Xian's complexion sank. "Are you from Blue Waves Academy?" The man took out a token. "Do you see this? Student token. I am a student of Blue Waves Academy. Now, I am in charge of everything in Blue Waves Academy." Yi Xian glanced at the token and his complexion suddenly became gloomy. This token is real. However, this person is fake. There were not many students in Blue Waves Academy and he knew all of them, but this person was definitely not among them. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, then asked, "How many best quality spirit stones?" The man smiled. 1,000 best quality spirit stones. 1,000. Yi Xian was about to speak when the man grinned. "It's 1,000 best quality spirit stones a day." 1,000 a day. Yi Xian knitted his eyebrows tightly when he heard that. He had sensed that there were at least several thousand people on Blue Waves Mountain. 1,000 a day. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned to the people in the hall. "From now on, you don't have to pay the best quality spirit stones a day." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. But the man in front of Yi Xian looked somewhat sinister. "Brother, are you here to cause trouble?" As he spoke, he pointed at Yi Xian's chest. "Even the cultivators of the divine central continent don't dare to invade my Blue Waves Academy. Who the fuck are you?" Yi Xian smiled. "You're only at the Nether Passage realm. You definitely don't have the ability to do this. You must have someone behind you, right?" The man smiled sinisterly. "Of course I have someone behind me. Behind me is Blue Waves Academy's dean, Yi Xian. Have you heard of Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes, a very, very handsome man. I admire him very much." The man sneered. "Since you've heard of him, why don't you get lost?" Yi Xian smiled. "Tell the person behind you to come out." The man wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly kicked. Bang bang. The bones in the man's knees instantly shattered, and he fell to his knees in front of Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian suddenly attack, everyone in the hall was stunned. Someone dared to attack Blue Waves Academy? In front of Yi Xian, the man roared hysterically, You bastard, how dare you? Dean Yi will not let you off." Yi Xian shook his head. "I think he will let me off." The man stared at Yi Xian with hatred. "He will definitely not let you off. He will definitely exterminate your entire family." Yi Xian touched his nose. "I think he won't exterminate my entire family. I can be sure of this." The man wanted to say something, but at this moment, an old man not far away suddenly stood up. He looked at Yi Xian with some disbelief, and said with a trembling voice, You are Dean Yi? Dean Yi?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian at the same time. At this moment, they realized that the person in front of them was somewhat familiar. The reason why they did not recognize Yi Xian was because Yi Xian had left for a long time, and not everyone had seen Yi Xian before. In front of Yi Xian, the man also looked at him. As he looked, the man's expression became somewhat ugly, and in the end, his body had already started to tremble. Obviously, he had already recognized Yi Xian. The man said with a trembling voice, Your Excellency, I was as blind as a bat." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Tell me, who told you to do this?" The man's expression became somewhat ugly, and he hesitated for a long time, and finally shook his head. "If I don't speak, I will die. If I speak, I will die, and my entire family will die." Yi Xian said indifferently, "You want to bargain with me?" The man hurriedly said, "I dare not. I just hope that your excellency can protect my family." Yi Xian smiled. "If you really want to protect your family, then you should commit suicide. Once you commit suicide, I believe that those people behind you will definitely not cause trouble for your family. However, you dare not commit suicide. The man's expression became somewhat ugly, and just when he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his fingers together. The man's right arm was directly sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The man's face instantly turned pale. Yi Xian smiled. You still won't speak? The man was about to speak, but at this moment, a middle-aged man nearby suddenly said, I know who it is. Yi Xian faced the middle-aged man, and at this moment, the man in front of him hurriedly said, It's... At this moment, a ray of sword light had already pierced the man's forehead. The man looked at Yi Xian in a daze. Yi Xian smiled. If you had admitted your mistake from the beginning and confessed, then I would have let you live. Unfortunately, it's too late now. After saying that, he walked to the middle-aged man nearby, and the latter slightly bowed. Greetings, Dean Yi. Everyone hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian when they heard the middle-aged man, and some of their eyes even revealed undisguised excitement and happiness. Yi Xian. He's back again. Yi Xian smiled. There's no need for all of this. As he spoke, he gazed at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice. The power behind that man is a group of mercenaries from the Central Divine Prefecture. They're staying in the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom right now, and they're in charge of the Imperial capital. The Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he turned around and left. He suddenly stopped when he arrived at the entrance, and then he said, All of you'll be staying here from now onward, and you don't have to pay top-grade spirit stones. However, if we return one day, then I hope that all of you can leave at that time. This place is for all of you to stay temporarily, not for all of you. I hope all of you understand. As soon as he finished speaking, he left Darkwave Hall and headed straight for the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. Yi Xian was very clearly aware that a person's heart wasn't content. On many occasions, when he gave others convenience, they would take it for granted. Moreover, if he didn't deal with many things well, then it would cause a huge amount of trouble in the future. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. At this moment, the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom was in a very miserable state because everyone had left. Yi Xian hadn't intended to ask them to return right now. Because the Realm Defense Alliance hadn't been dealt with yet, so it was very likely that they would be targeted by the Realm Defense Alliance if they returned. After he entered the Imperial Palace, Yi Xian went straight to the Supreme Harmony Hall. It didn't take long for a man to obstruct his path, and the man gazed coldly at Yi Xian. Fuck off. This. Yi Xian smiled, and then he raised his sword and swung it. This. The man's head instantly flew into the air. It didn't take long for a few dozen people to charge out from all directions and surround Yi Xian. At the same time, a middle-aged man walked over to Yi Xian. He glanced at Yi Xian with a slightly vigilant expression. I'm the leader of the Hunyuan mercenary group. May I know who you are? Yi Xian smiled. You're the one who occupied Blue Waves Academy and collected the so-called protection fee every day? The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. You're from Blue Waves Academy. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he said, Your Excellency, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but Yi Xian has already died in the Central Divine Prefecture, and even his corpse has been eaten by wild dogs. Your Excellency is risking your life for Blue Waves Academy. It's not worth it. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. My friends, I haven't had any holidays during the New Year. Just consider it as a holiday, because I have some matters to deal with during this period, so I can't stay at home every day. Thank you. Chapter 310. I died in the Central Divine Prefecture? Yi Xian was flabbergasted. Are you sure that Yi Xian died in the Central Divine Prefecture? The middle-aged man laughed coldly. How could it be fake? Yi Xian offended the Realm Defense Alliance, so how could he have survived the Realm Defense Alliance's bounty? Yi Xian nodded. You're right. As he spoke, he suddenly pressed the fingers of his right hand together and swept them forward. A sword howl resounded, and then a ray of light flashed. In an instant, The mercenaries around Yixian and the middle-aged man were instantly slashed into two at the waist. The middle-aged man was stunned by this scene. An instant later, he gazed at Yixian with terror. You're Yixian. Yixian smiled. You're right. I'll reward you with a sword strike. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand. The middle-aged man's head flew into the air while blood sprayed out like a fountain. The middle-aged man's eyes were wide open. Obviously, he'd died with everlasting regret. Yixian took the spatial rings of everyone here and glanced at them. There were all sorts of things within them, and there were over 1.6 billion top-grade spirit stones. 1.6 billion. In the Qingzhou region, it was already very, very terrifying to be able to have 1.6 billion. It was obvious how many cities these fellows had plundered during this period of time. Yixian took the spatial rings and was just about to leave. Suddenly, the voice of the god on the second floor resounded. She went to the fourth floor. The fourth floor. Yixian was stunned, and then he hurriedly entered the pagoda. The little girl wasn't on the first floor, nor was she on the second floor, nor was she on the third floor. The fourth floor. Yixian was stunned. How did she get up there? I don't know. This was the answer from the god on the second floor. Yixian gulped. This, second floor guru, this is not normal. How could she have possibly entered? How would I know? The guru on the second floor was a little angry. At this moment, a white light suddenly flashed on the first level. Soon, the little girl appeared in front of Yixian. Yixian quickly asked, You went to the fourth floor? The little girl nodded. Yixian asked again, What's on the fourth floor? The little girl glanced at Yixian. It told me not to tell you. It also told me to be careful of you. You are a very thick-skinned person. As she spoke, she flew in front of Yixian and then pinched Yixian's face with her small hand. She said with some doubt, It's not very thick. Yixian was speechless. At this moment, the little girl suddenly stretched out her little hand. Where's the spirit fruit? Yixian hurriedly took out some spirit fruits and gave them to the little girl. When she saw the spirit fruits, the little girl instantly beamed with joy and grabbed them. Unfortunately, the spirit fruits were too big, even bigger than her body. However, this didn't stop her from eating them. In just a few bites, the spirit fruit had been completely devoured by her. The little girl stretched out her hand again. Clearly, she wanted more. Yixian placed all of the spiritual fruits in front of the little girl. These were his trophies from the battles he had won in the past. He didn't sell all the spirit fruits to the third floor master of the drunken immortal building, but kept some for himself. Seeing so many spirit fruits, the little girl was incredibly excited. She picked up a spirit fruit and started munching on it. At the side, Yixian smiled and said, Is it delicious? The little girl nodded her head. Yes, it's delicious. Yixian smiled and asked, What's on the fourth floor? Little girl shaking his head, he said, I can't tell you. Yixian said seriously, Aren't we friends? Friends? The little girl glanced at Yixian. Then what is it? Yixian. The little girl looked at Yixian and then shook her head. You're a human. Humans are the most untrustworthy. Not a single human is good. Saying that, she seemed to think of something and put the spirit fruit aside, her expression a little sad. This place was originally fine, but you people wantonly destroyed it. A lot of blood flowed into the ground. You people are really bad. After saying that, she even glared at Yixian. Yixian was silent. Destruction. Obviously, because of the wanton destruction of the Qingzhou continent, the outside was no longer suitable for this little girl to live in. Moreover, the Realm Protection Alliance was looking for her everywhere. If she fell into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance, she definitely wouldn't have a good ending. Yixian collected his thoughts and smiled slightly. Little girl, I still don't know your name. The little girl shook her head. I won't tell you that my name is Xiaolinga. Yixian nodded. Okay, I won't know your name is Xiaolinga. Xiaolinga looked at Yixian and blinked, feeling that something was wrong. But she didn't think much of it and continued to nibble on the spirit fruit. Yixian also didn't ask Xiaolinga what was on the fourth floor, because it was meaningless to ask more. When he got the Dao Law, he would naturally know what was on the 4th floor. However, this little girl could actually go to the 4th floor. This really shocked him. Since she could go to the 4th floor, it was possible that she could go to the 5th, 6th, 9th, the 9th floor. Yi Xian was a little curious about what was locked up on the 9th floor. After playing with Xiao Linger for a while, Yi Xian left the prison tower. At this time, the voice of the great god on the 2nd floor sounded again. You must bring that woman back as soon as possible, otherwise you're finished. The mysterious woman. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Where could he find the mysterious woman? But to be honest, he really missed the mysterious woman a little. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head and turned to leave. After leaving the palace of Jiang country, Yi Xian went to the Devil sect. At this time, the overall strength of the Devil sect could be said to have skyrocketed, because in Qingzhou, they could develop unscrupulously without anyone stopping them. Not only that, but they also had the support of the Realm Protection Alliance. Under such circumstances, the strength of all the disciples in the Devil sect was greatly improved. In the main hall of the Devil sect, Ku Mingxu suddenly opened his eyes and saw a man in a gray robe standing not far away from him. The man in the gray robe just stood there without any aura, as if he didn't exist. Seeing this person, Ku Mingxu's face changed and he quickly got up. Senior? The man in the gray robe nodded slightly. Sect leader Ku, how have you been? Ku Mingxu quickly said, May I know why you're here, senior? The man in the gray robe said indifferently, Sect leader Ku should know about the matter between the Pale Sword sect and the Realm Protection Alliance, right? Ku Mingxu nodded slightly, yes. Right? My Devil sect won't participate in it. The man in the gray robe spoke indifferently, Sect leader Ku, if I were you, I would stop right now and leave Qingzhou. Ku Mingxu frowned when he heard this. The Devil sect was developing rapidly right now, so it would be a great loss to leave now. The man in the gray robe said, Sect leader Ku, if you're unwilling to leave now, then your Devil sect won't be able to leave in the future. Ku Mingxu gazed at the man in the gray robe. Senior, please tell me what to do. The man in the gray robe said, Now that the Green Province is in chaos, the Origin Heart is about to appear. Once the Origin Heart appears, your Devil sect and Blood sect will no longer have any value to the Realm Defense Alliance. At that time, the slightest mistake will cause your Devil sect and Blood sect to be doomed eternally. Ku Mingxu hesitated for a moment and said, I don't think so. Exalt Lu promised my Devil sect that the entire Qingzhou will belong to my Devil sect in the future. You believe that? The man in the gray robe spoke coldly. Don't you know what the Realm Protection Alliance is like? Right now, they need your Devil sect. Therefore, they will agree to any of your requests. However, once they obtain the Origin Source Heart, your Devil sect will no longer have any value to them. As he spoke, he paused slightly before he continued. Moreover, the Quintessence Core is about to emerge in the Pine Prefecture. Once it does, then the Pine Prefecture will become a huge vortex. If your Devil sect continues staying here, then it's impossible to guarantee that you won't be swept into the vortex. At that time, it'll be difficult for your Devil sect to leave. Ku Mingxu was still hesitating. The man in the gray robe spoke abruptly. Since sect leader Ku isn't willing to leave, then I won't say anything further. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Right at this moment, Ku Mingxu suddenly said, Senior, please wait. The man in the gray robe stopped, and Ku Mingxu asked, May I ask if there are any other powers besides the Pale Sword sect that are acting against the Realm Protection Alliance? The man in the gray robe spoke indifferently. What do you think? Ku Mingxu hesitated for a moment, and then he bowed slightly. Senior, please enlighten me. The man in the gray robe fell silent for a moment, and then he said, The Profound Gate has expressed its intention to join us. Ku Mingxu was shocked when he heard this, and he was about to speak when the man in the gray robe had vanished. Within the hall, Ku Mingxu sat on the chair and fell silent for a very long time. At this moment, his heart was like a tempestuous storm. The Profound Gate. That's an extremely mysterious power, and it's definitely extremely strong. If it was just the Pale Sword sect, then it would definitely be unable to defeat the Realm Protection Alliance. But if the Profound Gate was included, then it would be difficult to say. Moreover, there might be more than one Profound Gate. At this moment, Ku Mingxiu was in a dilemma. Should I leave or not? If he left now, then it would truly be a loss for him. But if he didn't leave, then he really didn't want to get involved in the muddy waters of Qingzhou. Within the hall, Ku Mingxiu fell silent for a very long time, and then he shook his head and sighed. There was a pitch-black vortex somewhere in the starry sky. Suddenly, a star cloud shuttle flew out from within the pitch-black vortex. A middle-aged man and an old man stood on the star cloud shuttle. The old man glanced at the surroundings and frowned deeply. It's so remote. The person we're looking for shouldn't be here, right? The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. We can't miss any place. If we still can't find him, then once that person gets angry, our spirit void star palace will probably be completely destroyed. When he heard this, the old man seemed to have thought of something, and fear instantly appeared in his eyes. That woman! That terrifying woman! The middle-aged man shook his head slightly. I wonder where exactly that person is? Alas! The old man said in a low voice, this world should be under the jurisdiction of the Realm Protection Alliance. Should we go look for them and ask them to help us search? Realm Protection Alliance? The middle-aged man looked at the old man. Why haven't I heard of it? The old man said indifferently, a third-rate power. It's normal that you haven't heard of it. The middle-aged man nodded. Then let's go meet them. I hope we'll be able to gain something this time. Otherwise, I don't dare to return. In next to no time, the star cloud shuttle vanished into the boundless starry sky. Chapter 311. After leaving the Devil Sect, Yi Xian immediately entered a mountain range. This time, he had come to the Devil Sect out of compassion. As long as the Devil Sect was still in Qingzhou, there would definitely be countless people who would suffer. Although he could not change the current situation in Qingzhou, he was still willing to help the countless living beings in Qingzhou as long as it was within his power. As for himself, there was only one thing to do now, and that was to cultivate. The Realm Defense Alliance would soon make a big move, and before that, he had to improve his strength. Although there was the Pale Sword Sect, countless facts had told him that people could only rely on themselves. Only by relying on himself could he be relied on. In the mountain range, Yi Xian came to a small stream and sat on a boulder beside the stream. A moment later, a small, empty character suddenly appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. He was now in the Dharma Defensive Realm, and what he needed to do was to break through to the true Dharma Defensive Realm. Although he did not have a spirit sword, he wanted to give it a try. The so-called true Dharma Defensive Realm was to be able to control space. Regarding space, Yi Xian actually did not know much, because his Dharma Defensive Realm had been improved by relying on the Space Dao Law. To put it bluntly, it was a little overstated. Since Yi Xian began to sense everything around him. He felt the wind, the earth, the river, and also space. This space was a little illusory and even a little mysterious. When a warrior cultivated to a certain level, they could sense space, but feeling it did not mean that they understood it or recognized it. Gradually, the space around Yi Xian began to fluctuate. At this moment, space was no longer illusory, but could be seen with the naked eye. With the help of the Space Dao Law, Yi Xian began to change the space around him. Soon, the space around him became distorted, and he himself also began to distort. However, Yi Xian stopped very soon, because he had felt a sharp pain. Not daring to experiment on himself, Yi Xian began to change the space in front of him. Gradually, the river in front of him began to distort. A few days later, the Devil Sect suddenly announced that they were leaving Qingzhou. On the Qing State path, the Devil Sect's sect leader Ku Mingxiu's cloud ship suddenly stopped, and an old man silently appeared in front of Ku Mingxiu. The person who had arrived was precisely Mo Xiu. Ku Mingxiu smiled and said, Elder Mo. Mo Xiu glanced at Ku Mingxiu and said calmly, Sect leader Ku, why did you suddenly announce that we're leaving the Azure State? Ku Mingxiu smiled and said, Nothing, I just feel that it's time to go back. Mo Xiu's eyes narrowed. Is that true? Ku Mingxiu nodded. Of course. Mo Xiu stared at Ku Mingxiu for a long time. In the end, he shook his head and sighed. Sect leader Ku, the old man once promised you that once you get your hands on the origin heart, Qingzhou will belong to your devil sect. If you leave now, all your previous efforts will go to waste. Ku Mingxiu laughed and said, the devil faction is not greedy. The Azure Prefecture is too big for us to swallow. Mo Xiu said in a low voice, Brother Ku, tell me honestly, did someone say something to you? Or is someone threatening you? Ku Mingxiu shook his head and smiled. Brother Mo, you're overthinking it. Mo Xiu nodded lightly. Since it's like that, then the old man won't say anything further. Brother Ku, take care. Ku Mingxiu cupped his fists and said, farewell. Just like that, the devil sect left the Azure Prefecture. In midair, Mo Xiu stared fixedly at the devil sect's army that had vanished into the distance, and his expression was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, an old man appeared by Mo Xiu's side, and he said in a low voice, there's something strange about this. Mo Xiu's expression was gloomy. I presume that the Pale Sword sect did something to make the devil sect decide to leave the Azure Prefecture. The old man asked, what should we do now? Mo Xiu fell silent for a moment, and then he said, send the world protectors into the Azure Prefecture, and we'll deal with the rest ourselves. Besides that, the Exalt Lord has given the order that the Origin Heart will appear in a few days, and the Pale Sword sect might make a huge move. During this period of time, transfer all the true Imperial Law Realm experts back and ask them to swiftly rush to the Azure Prefecture. The old man said in a low voice, is this a decisive battle? Mo Xiu's voice was fierce. If the Pale Sword sect dares to stop us from obtaining the Origin Heart, then we will fight to the death. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. In a certain small city, a middle-aged man walked into a tavern. It was drizzling outside the tavern. The middle-aged man sat down in front of an old man, who bowed slightly. Senior brother. These two people were Song Xian and Chen Beihan. Chen Beihan nodded. Has the Realm Protector Alliance made any moves? Song Xian nodded. I just received news that they have already begun to mobilize all the true Imperial Law Realm experts. It seems that they want to transfer these people to the Azure Prefecture. It seems that the Origin Heart is about to appear. Chen Beihan lifted the cup in front of him and took a small sip, before he smiled and said, it seems that the Realm Protector Alliance is determined to obtain the Azure Prefecture Origin Heart. Song Xian said in a low voice, what do they want the Origin Heart for? I really can't figure it out. Chen Beihan said with smile, this Origin Heart has a lot of uses. However, they should have another goal, but I don't know what it is. In addition, if I'm not wrong, they should also want the Divine Central Continent's Origin Heart. Song Xian's expression changed slightly. If they want the Divine Central Continent's Origin Heart, will the Celestial Sect of Wonders and the aristocratic families of the upper world agree? Chen Beihan shook his head and smiled. You are still so naive. Think about it, if the Realm Protector Alliance manages to deal with these forces, then who in the Divine Central Continent can stop them? As long as the Realm Protector Alliance is willing to pay the price, they can be dealt with. Song Xian's expression darkened. As Chen Beihan said, as long as the Celestial Sect of Wonders, the 10,000 Beast Mountain Range, and the aristocratic families of the upper world do not object, no one in the Divine Central Continent can resist the Realm Protector Alliance. Song Xian asked again, what should we do now? Chen Beihan said softly, tell them to get ready. Once the Origin Heart appears, even if we can't snatch it, we must destroy it. We must not let it fall into the hands of the Realm Protector Alliance. Song Xian nodded slightly. As if thinking of something, he hesitated for a moment and then asked, Senior brother, there is something I don't know if I should ask. Chen Beihan smiled. Then don't ask. Song Xian said in a low voice, I still have to ask. Otherwise, I won't feel comfortable. Senior brother, if I'm not wrong, when Yi Xian entered my Blue Sword sect, You should have already discovered his true identity, but you did not expose him. Moreover, you protected him with the power of the entire sect and made an enemy of the Realm Protector Alliance. At this point, he glanced at Qin Beihan and did not say anything else. Qin Beihan smiled. You want to say that I have another purpose? Song Xian nodded. Qin Beihan said softly, I have a purpose. Song Xian looked at Qin Beihan. Qin Beihan smiled. First, we will eventually fight the Realm Protector Alliance. It is unavoidable. You should know very well how Master died. Master? Hearing this, Song Xian's expression suddenly darkened. Because the Master of the Seven Sword Immortals had been ambushed and killed by the Realm Protector Alliance. However, the Realm Protector Alliance had never admitted to it. But everyone knew that it was done by the Realm Protector Alliance. Qin Beihan said softly, back then, eldest senior brother wanted to lead the entire sect to fight the Realm Protector Alliance, but I stopped him. At this point, he shook his head and smiled. Because of this, eldest senior brother still can't get over it. And little junior sister, after that, she no longer interfered in any matters of the sect. She locked herself in the Cloudy Sword Hall every day, and junior sister Gu, she has been guarding Master's body until now. Song Xian sighed. To tell you the truth, I also blamed you back then. But I have thought it through these years. Back then we were just sword emperors. If we had followed eldest senior brother, our blue sword sect would have been annihilated. Qin Beihan shook his head slightly. In fact, how could I not hate myself? Master adopted us all, especially me. I still remember back then, I was just a beggar on the side of the road. It was Master who brought me back to Blue Sword Sect, let me practice the sword, let me eat my fill and wear my clothes, and when Master died, I was powerless. The feeling. As he spoke, he raised the cup in front of him and drained it in one gulp. Song Xian also raised his cup and drained it in one gulp. His eyes had already turned icy cold. After a moment, Qin Beihan shook his head and smiled. No matter what, it's time to put an end to all the grudges of the past. At this point, he looked at Song Xian and smiled. I haven't answered your question. The reason why I accepted Yi Xian was indeed a little selfish. He is quite mysterious, especially the mysterious woman behind him. He is definitely not an ordinary person. Great Sword Immortal? Song Xian asked. Qin Beihan shook his head. If it was just a Great Sword Immortal, the Realm Protector Alliance would not be so afraid. It should be someone who surpasses the Great Sword Immortal. Hearing this, Song Xian's expression suddenly turned solemn. Surpassing the Great Sword Immortal. This kind of person was rare in the Blue Firmament world. There were very few of them in history. Qin Beihan continued, my selfish motive is that since his enemy is also the Realm Protector Alliance, we should form an alliance with him and hope that the mysterious woman behind him will act. However, after interacting with him, I found that he has a good temperament and values relationships. He is also a good seedling. So, I sincerely hope that he will sincerely join my Blue Sword sect. Song Xian nodded. He is indeed a good person, but he is a little hot-tempered and can't stand being bullied. Qin Beihan laughed heartily. If our founder could stand being bullied, he would not have killed the Realm Protector Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu. If he did not use that sword, our Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protector Alliance would not be at each other's throats today. However, if he did not use that sword, our Blue Sword sect would have to lower our heads for the rest of our lives. Song Xian shook his head and smiled. That's true. Who cares if he is hot-tempered or not, as long as he has the ability? Qin Beihan nodded slightly. If the origin heart appears, tell that kid not to participate in this matter. It's best to have him hide. If we win, it's naturally good, but if we lose, we have to leave some incense for the Pale Sword sect. As they spoke, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they picked up their wine glasses and drained it in one gulp. P.S. How many readers came from Mighty Heavenly Sword Domain? Or could it be that most of the readers were new readers? M. Chapter 312. Beside the stream, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly. He had been sitting here for 3 days and 3 nights. There were no shortcuts on the path of cultivation. Even if there were, one could not be taken. This was one of Yi Xian's realizations. Because at this moment, he realized that his Dharma defensive realm was actually not very powerful. Without the Space Tao law, strictly speaking, he could not be considered a Dharma defensive realm. The Space Tao law could be used as a reference, but it could not be relied on. 3 days later, Yi Xian no longer used the Space Tao law, but relied on his own ability to comprehend space. And after a few days, Yi Xian could already change space without the Space Tao law, but he still could not disintegrate space. To reach the true Dharma defensive realm, he must disintegrate space, in other words, control space. While Yi Xian was cultivating, he did not notice that Xiao Linger was currently climbing to the top of the prison pagoda. It was not that she did not want to fly, but that she could not fly. Or rather, it was very strenuous for her to fly. Who knew what she was going to do up there? After an unknown period of time, Xiao Linger finally climbed to the top. At the top, there were 3 swords stuck in the ground. The 3 swords were inserted quietly at the top of the pagoda, as if they were suppressing something. Xiao Linger climbed to the front of the 3 swords and glanced at them. Finally, her gaze fell on the sword in the middle. When she saw this sword, Xiao Linger's eyes lit up, because there was a stick of candied hawthorn hanging on the hilt of this sword. Xiao Linger took the candied hawthorn off, peeled off the parchment, and licked it. In an instant, her whole body quivered. So sour. Xiao Linger blinked, her expression a little interesting. After a moment, she licked it again, and her head trembled. Although it was sour, it seemed delicious. Just like that, Xiao Linger sat at the top of the tower, leisurely licking her sugar-coated haws. After a while, she suddenly looked at the bottom of the sword in the middle. There was a small box placed there. The box was very, very small, only the size of a palm. If one did not look carefully, they would not have noticed it. Xiao Linger climbed up to the box. There was a small piece of white paper on the box. There were only 2 small words on it. Strictly speaking, they were not words at all. They were twisted and crooked. These 2 small words were, "Wait, stay." Xiao Linger did not recognize these 2 words at all. She gently opened the small box, and no one knew what she saw. Xiao Linger clapped her hands excitedly at the top of the tower. Not long after the Devil sect left, the Blood sect also left Qing province. As soon as the 2 sects left, some of the cultivators of the divine central continent noticed that something was amiss. Thus, they too left or went into hiding. However, Qingzhou did not calm down. On the contrary, it was still as chaotic as ever. This time, it was the native cultivators of Qingzhou who were in chaos. Everyone knew that there was no order in Qingzhou at the moment. No one cared about anything. Under such circumstances, many people began to act recklessly. Most of the time, it was their own people who caused the most trouble. A few days later, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared in the lands of Qingzhou. Then, more than a dozen cities were suddenly massacred. Not only that, but cultivators in many places also died tragically for no reason. At this moment, the entire Qingzhou was in a state of panic. As for the desolate mountain range, the entire mountain range suddenly began to crumble layer by layer. Not only that, but a faint red appeared on the ground. 30 people gathered in the sky above the desolate mountain range, and their leader was none other than High Lord Lu. Beside High Lord Lu was Emoshio. And the people behind them were all true defensive Dharma realm experts. High Lord Lu looked down. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Fong. Has everything been set up? Emoshio nodded slightly. Yes. As soon as the origin heart appears, it will not be able to escape. High Lord Lu looked around. What's the Blue Sword Sect's movement? Emoshio said in a low voice. I've received news that Blue Mountain's 7 Sword Immortals have left Qingzhou. At this time, I estimate they are already in Qingzhou. It seems they are prepared to fight to the death with us. High Lord Lu lightly said, no matter. This Blue Sword Sect has indeed let them live comfortably for too long. Immortal nodded. Not only did Blue Sword Sect want revenge on the Realm Protection Alliance, but the Realm Protection Alliance also wanted revenge on Blue Sword Sect. One had to know that the corpse of a High Lord from the Realm Protection Alliance was still hanging at the foot of Blue Mountain. At this time, High Lord Lu said, "No matter what, this origin heart is of great use to His Excellency. There must be no mistakes." Immortal nodded. "Understood. I'll go arrange it." Finished speaking, he turned around and left. In the sky, High Lord Lu slowly closed his eyes. In fact, he wasn't worried about Blue Sword Sect, because he knew Blue Sword Sect inside out. What he was truly worried about was the mysterious woman behind Yi Xian. That woman was too terrifying. Even thinking about it, he still felt a lingering fear. A moment later, High Lord Lu suddenly opened his eyes. "Send someone to investigate Yi Xian's whereabouts." A powerhouse immediately turned around and left. Somewhere in the mountain range, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly next to a small stream. He had been sitting here for quite some time. Nighttime. In the sky, stars filled the sky and a bright moon hung high in the sky. The earth was silent. In Yi Xian's ears, there was only the sound of the flowing river. In the middle of the night, Yi Xian's right hand slowly lifted up. In an instant, the space around his raised hand actually began to distort. Yi Xian's right palm opened and the space immediately returned to normal. At this time, his right hand lightly pressed down on the river in front of him. In an instant, the river in front of his palm actually disappeared. Space decomposition. By the river, Yi Xian took a deep breath. Right now, he had not reached the true defense realm, but he already had the power of the true defense realm. The reason why he had not reached the true defense realm was because he did not have a heaven-class sword to devour. Realms did not rely solely on enlightenment. Every advancement required various aspects. Moreover, the true defense realm did not only involve space decomposition. One's soul, mental strength, physical body, and all other aspects had to reach a certain level to be called the true defense realm. However, right now, he only lacked swords. As long as he had enough swords, he could step into the true defense realm at any time. Yi Xian did not leave. He was still sitting by the river. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Yu Qi's words. What was a sword celestial? The so-called sword celestial referred to having one's own Tao of the sword. And what was his Tao of the sword? He had thought about this question before, but he did not think it through thoroughly. Why did he want to learn the sword? In the beginning, his motive for learning the sword was very simple. He just wanted to become stronger and he felt that swordsman was very cool. But now, he realized that the path of the sword Tao was much more complicated than he had imagined. Especially when he was comprehending in the sword tomb of the Pale Sword Sect, he understood that the Tao of the sword actually contained too much. Moreover, everyone's Tao of the sword had its own uniqueness. Then what was his Tao of the sword? At this thought, Yi Xian gradually became dazed. His sword intent was the good and evil sword intent. As for good and evil, he actually did not understand it very well. This was because the matters of the world were too complicated. Many times, good was not necessarily evil, and evil was not necessarily good. Good person? Bad person? If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Looking at it from different angles might result in different results. But what about the Tao of the sword? What was his Tao of the sword? Yi Xian asked himself again. There was no answer. Not only was there no answer, but it was also a little chaotic. Just like that, Yi Xian sat in silence for an entire night. At daybreak, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he took out a wooden figure. This wooden figure was none other than Yi Ling. Looking at the wooden figure, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. Soon, a memory of the past surfaced in his mind. It was something that happened many years ago. He carried his younger sister on his back and went shopping. At that time, his younger sister had 2 pigtails and wore a floral dress. At that time, he was already the heir of the Yi family, so he did not have to live a hard life. Yi Xian carried Yi Ling to a noodle shop. The 2 siblings sat down and Yi Ling looked at him with a bright smile. Soon, 2 bowls of steaming hot noodles were served. The siblings each had a fried egg in their bowl. Yi Ling picked up the noodles and started eating, while Yi Xian looked at her quietly. His face was also full of smiles. Very satisfied, very happy, because he could give his younger sister nice clothes and good food. Moreover, no one in the Yi family dared to bully his younger sister anymore. After a while, Yi Ling picked up the bowl and drank the soup. As if thinking of something, she looked at Yi Xian and grinned. "Brother, why aren't you eating?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you happy?" Yi Ling hurriedly went to his side and hugged him tightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly gasped. Yi Ling quickly asked, "What's wrong, brother?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm fine." Yi Ling nodded and then leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She did not notice that there was blood slowly dripping from Yi Ling's back. As the heir of the Yi family, in order to fight for the interests of the family, he had to fight with the other families almost every day. Getting injured was a common occurrence. However, he was very satisfied, because he could change his younger sister's fate through his own efforts. Until now, he could not forget the life he and his younger sister had led when that woman left. At that time, his younger sister could not even afford a bowl of noodles. Not to mention a bowl of noodles, the siblings almost starved to death several times. The saddest thing for a man was to not have the ability to protect the people around him. At that time, he was still young. In the face of this sudden change, he was at a loss and did not know what to do. In fact, the one who was the most afraid at that time was not Yi Ling, but him. Because looking at his younger sister, he did not know what to do in the future. At that time, it was the time of his life that he was the most afraid, confused, and fearful. Under the sunset, Yi Xian suddenly pulled Yi Ling out of the noodle house. Yi Ling tightly held onto Yi Xian's hand and the siblings slowly walked into the distance. On the way, "Brother, can we eat noodles every day in the future?" Really? Really? Brother promises you." "Well, then I want to add more eggs, one at a time." "No problem." "Hee, brother is the best. By the way, brother, do you know what my biggest wish is?" "What is it?" "Hee, I want to open a noodle house in the future. I will make noodles for you every day." End of this chapter. Chapter 3:13. By the river, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually widened. Sister. Be it in the past or now, he did not have too many thoughts. He only wanted his sister to be well. Of course, now, he also hoped that more people would be well. Tuoba Yen Jiangjiu, Shaoan Jianji, Mo Yunqi, Ling Han, and the others, he hoped that everyone would be well. Of course, he also hoped that he would be well. However, it was not an easy task for everyone around him to be well. Strength. He had to have strength. Powerful strength. When he thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly came to a realization. Sword path? What kind of sword path did he want? Actually, he only wanted to become stronger. Strength. When he thought of this, a sword intent suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Good and evil sword intent. 2 sword intents spread out from Yi Xian's body and drifted in all directions. The 2 sword intents drifted in all directions like a gust of wind. Soon, the entire mountain range was filled with Yi Xian's sword intent. And his sword intent was also quietly changing. Strength. A man must have strength. If he didn't have strength, he would be nothing. Even if he had strength, he might not be able to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword path was the path of an expert. The sword was only a way for him to become stronger. Of course, he also liked the sword. What was his sword path? This time, Yi Xian had an answer. His sword path was the path of an expert. How strong must he be? He was not ambitious. As long as he was strong enough that no one dared to bully him, he would be free. When he thought of this, Yi Xian stood up. The moment he stood up, the sword intents in the entire mountain range suddenly gathered towards Yi Xian. Soon, the sword intents all surged into Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly sat down cross-legged. He opened his right hand, and a sword suddenly appeared in his palm. In next to no time, the sword in his palm started to tremble violently. At the same time, strands of sword intent surged incessantly into the sword, and the sword in his hand trembled even more violently as if it was on the verge of shattering. Yi Xian's expression was solemn because he noticed that his sword intent was raging within his body at this moment. He'd utilized his sword to draw it out, but it didn't seem to have any effect. What was going on? Yi Xian quickly asked, "Second floor guru?" The Almighty on the second floor did not reply. Yi Xian asked again, "If you don't speak, I'm going to die." At this moment, he was extremely uncomfortable. It felt like his body was about to explode. At this moment, the second floor guru suddenly said, "Sword intent changes, guide." "Idiot! How can I guide it?" Yi Xian was burning with anxiety. "I don't know either." Hearing this, Yi Xian was so angry that he almost went berserk. "If you don't know, then why did you say it?" Without asking the second floor guru any further, Yi Xian quickly released his sword intent again. Soon, his sword intent floated around like before, and at this moment he felt much more relaxed. However, those sword intents, at this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he frowned. "My body can no longer contain my sword intent. Does this mean that in the future, my sword intent will become one with heaven and earth?" At this point, his expression suddenly changed. "Sword immortal? Have I become a sword immortal?" With that said, this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. He pointed his fingers forward. A ray of sword light shot out, and a giant rock dozens of feet away was instantly pierced. Yi Xian was stunned, because he realized that the feeling was different. This feeling was very strange, very, very strange, because when he used this sword just now, the speed of the sword was much faster than before. Not only that, he felt that there was something else in this sword. Spirituality. He thought of this word. Yi Xian turned around and pointed his finger again. The moment he pointed, the sword on the ground in the distance suddenly flew up, and the next moment, it directly pierced through an ancient tree dozens of feet away from him. Now, he could use the sword as he pleased. Not only that, but he also realized that as long as he willed it, his sword intent would appear in the surroundings at any time. Now, his sword intent was everywhere. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly received a voice transmission, and in the next moment, he flew up into the sky on his sword. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the vast horizon. The desolate mountain range. At this moment, the desolate mountain range had changed beyond recognition. The ground had cracked and magma flowed out. The surroundings were filled with a pungent smell of blood. On this mountain range, there was a huge light formation that covered the entire desolate mountain range. In the sky above the desolate mountain range, High Lord Lu and the others waited quietly. On the other side, Chen Beihan and the others were also waiting. They were all waiting for the birth of the origin heart of Qingzhou. Not only Pale Sword Sect and the Realm Defense Alliance, but many forces in the Divine Central Continent were also paying attention to you. Because this time, it was very likely that this would be a battle to the death between the Realm Defense Alliance and Pale Sword Sect. This battle was very likely to affect the entire structure of the Divine Central Continent. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or Pale Sword Sect, they were both top forces. If these two top forces were to fight to the death, the impact would be enormous. Therefore, many forces were constantly paying attention to Qingzhou, including the Mystic Gate. The one who had come to Qingzhou this time was Mu Xiaoling, who Yi Xian had met once before. And the one who had transmitted the voice transmission to Yi Xian was also Mu Xiaoling. In front of a waterfall, Yi Xian landed on his sword. Beside the waterfall sat a woman. This person was Mu Xiaoling. Seeing Yi Xian, Mu Xiaoling got up and walked in front of Yi Xian. Then, she sized up Yi Xian with some surprise in her eyes. "You seem to have become stronger again." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Mu, how is my sister?" Now, the one he was most worried about was Yi Ling. Mu Xiaoling nodded slightly. "Don't worry, she's fine. The current her is already at the Dharma controlling realm. However, this time, we didn't tell her about the matter between you and the Realm Defense Alliance because we didn't want to affect her. Please understand." Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. In fact, he also didn't want Yi Ling to know about the matter between him and the Realm Defense Alliance. Otherwise, who knew how anxious this girl would be? Mu Xiaoling glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "You really want to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the Azure Province's origin heart?" Yi Xian nodded. Mu Xiaoling shook her head slightly. It's not wise to go head-on against the Realm Defense Alliance. However, the grudge between your Azure Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance is indeed unresolvable. Yi Xian smiled. You didn't come here just to chat with me, right? Mu Xiaoling said, Of course not. This time, I came to ask if you are willing to leave the Azure world. Leave the Azure world? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. What do you mean? Mu Xiaoling pondered for a moment and then said, This world is very big, much bigger than you can imagine. Outside, there is a wider stage. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. If you are willing to leave, my celestial sect is willing to protect you. Yi Xian didn't even think about it and shook his head. In this kind of situation, he couldn't leave. Azure Sword sect had treated him well. If he left now, he would be too inhumane. Moreover, he had many friends and family in Azure Province. If he left, it would be difficult to protect them from the Realm Defense Alliance. You don't want to go out and take a look? Mu Xiaoling asked. Yi Xian smiled. I want to, but not now. Mu Xiaoling said in a low voice, Forgive me for being blunt, but if you don't leave now, you might not be able to leave in the future even if you want to. Yi Xian frowned. Do you know something? Mu Xiaoling hesitated for a moment and then said, The Realm Defense Alliance isn't that simple. You should know that even a genius like the Azure Sword Master couldn't destroy it, let alone now. Although many powers in the Divine Central Continent don't like the Realm Defense Alliance, it is still the #1 power in the Azure world. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. My celestial sect has also heard of the mysterious woman behind you. She shouldn't be simple, but I can only tell you that the Realm Defense Alliance isn't simple either. If it's possible, it's best that you leave the Azure world with us now. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I appreciate Celestial Sect's good intentions. Mu Xiaoling said in a low voice, Don't you think about your sister? If something happens to you, what will happen to her? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, My sister is someone close to me. For her, I am willing to do anything. But if I leave now, I will be running away. I will be a coward. Behind me are my friends, my brothers, and my woman. Do you understand? Mu Xiaoling looked deeply at Yi Xian. Then I wish you good luck. With that, she turned and left. Next to the waterfall, Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Actually, I also want to run, but in life, there are some things that I have to do even if I know I might die. At this moment, he took out the voice transmission stone. Soon, a voice rang out from the voice transmission stone. A moment later, Yi Xian turned around and soared into the sky on his sword. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the vast horizon. Yi Xian arrived at the edge of the mountain range, where he saw Chen Beihan and Song Xian. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the two. Greetings, Sect Master. Greetings, Martial Uncle. Chen Beihan nodded. Azure Prefecture may be in chaos. Tell your friends in Azure Prefecture to pay attention. Yi Xian nodded. I will inform them. Chen Beihan added, If chaos breaks out, don't interfere. Yi Xian grinned. I can already fight against the true Imperial Law stage. Chen Beihan smiled. I know, but you have more important things to do, and that is to live well. Live well? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Just as he was about to ask, Chen Beihan suddenly said, 10 miles to the right, your master is waiting for you. Go. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded and turned to leave. Looking in the direction Yi Xian left, Chen Beihan softly said, Shangyu, Nengong, Yi Xian. The future of the Blue Sword sect may have to rely on these 3 little guys. Song Xian nodded. Fortunately, the 3 of them seem to have a good relationship. There won't be any internal strife in the future. Chen Beihan smiled. Although this kid has a bad temper, if he treats someone as his own, he will be very loyal. Unfortunately, this temper. Sigh, it's just too irritable. just like eldest senior brother back then. With that, the two looked at each other and smiled. P.S. Today is Valentine's Day. I'm a little busy. I have a few appointments. End of this chapter. Chapter 3:14. On the other side, Yi Xian came to a small mountain. Yu Qi was sitting quietly at the top of the mountain. Yi Xian walked to Yu Qi's back and bowed. Greetings, master. Yu Qi nodded. Sit down. Yi Xian sat beside Yu Qi. Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, Do you know the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian nodded. When Pale World Sword Master was still alive. Yu Qi nodded. Back then, when Ancestor was still alive, the entire Azure world, including the Realm Protection Alliance, had to lower their heads to Pale Sword Sect. That was the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect. Unfortunately, after Ancestor left, Pale Sword Sect no longer had someone like him. Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and said softly, Actually, eldest senior brother was the most likely to become someone like Ancestor. Unfortunately, speaking of this, she did not continue. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Unfortunately what? Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then said softly, Unfortunately, his sword heart had once collapsed, otherwise, he would not have achieved what he has today. Sword heart collapsed? Yi Xian frowned. How did it collapse? Yu Qi said calmly, Women. Women. Yi Xian. Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, That year, eldest senior brother was too amazing, so amazing that even the younger generation of Xian Gate could not suppress him. This made the Realm Protection Alliance afraid. They did not want a second ancestor to appear in Azure World, but they could not kill eldest senior brother. Thus, they used a honey trap. Honey trap. Yi Xian's expression froze. This was so fucking melodramatic. Yu Qi said again, A woman from the Realm Protection Alliance deliberately approached eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother did not care at first, but unfortunately, that woman was not an ordinary person. In short, the two of them ended up together. However, in the end, eldest senior brother killed her with his own hands. Yi Xian frowned. Even if she's from the Realm Protection Alliance, she shouldn't have killed him. Or did the other party do something? Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. That woman was also sincere towards eldest senior brother. No matter what, she wouldn't harm eldest senior brother. The Realm Defense Alliance had no choice but to change their method, and that was to use that woman to kill me, who was the previous sect leader of our Blue Sword sect. Speaking of this, she lay on the ground. After a moment of silence, she said, That time, the previous sect master was surrounded and killed by dozens of mysterious experts. After the incident, eldest senior brother could not accept this reality. His sword heart instantly shattered, and his strength directly dropped from the True Defense Law realm to the Nether Passage realm. Not only that, he, who was originally a sword immortal, also dropped to the level of sword master. Yi Xian fell silent. He did not expect that the Realm Protection Alliance and Song Sword Sect had so many grudges between them. At this time, Yu Qi said, Eldest senior brother has left the sect for a long time. He has never returned to the sect because second senior brother stopped him from taking revenge against the Realm Protection Alliance. Regarding this matter, he has always been brooding over it. Yi Xian said softly, Master, you definitely can't take it to heart, right? Yu Qi gently brushed her hair behind her ear. In the beginning, I couldn't take it to heart. It was definitely because second senior brother was afraid of death. But after so many years, I gradually understood his painstaking efforts. Eldest senior brother's temper is the same as yours, a fiery one who cannot bear the slightest bit of anger. But second senior brother is different. He considers many things. At that time, if we went to fight the Realm Protection Alliance, not only would we lose, we would also lose countless Song Sword Sect disciples. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian. He was right. Yi Xian grinned. Master, what do you want to say? Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian. There was a complicated expression in his eyes. You are very outstanding, just like eldest senior brother in the past, but your temper is too explosive. I am a little worried that in the future, I worry that in the future, when you encounter something, you will not consider the big picture, only acting according to your temper. At that time, you will harm many people around you. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, actually, I am also quite smart. Yu Qi shook her head slightly. I am not saying you are stupid. Not only are you not stupid, but many times you are quite shrewd, but if someone annoys you, you will disregard everything. Regarding this, I am very worried. Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart warmed slightly. He smiled and said, this can't be helped. I am a person who cannot bear anger, and I also cannot bear to see my friends and brothers being bullied. But master, then again, people only live for a lifetime. Why let themselves be bullied? In any case, I, Yi Xian, will not casually bully others, but if anyone dares to bully me, I will definitely beat him to death. In Qingqing, he understood a truth. As a person, you can be a good person, but you absolutely cannot not have a temper. Because often the ones who are bullied the most are the good people. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. She lightly patted Yi Xian's head. I did not say that you cannot fight back if you are bullied. What I mean is, in the future, you need to consider things more carefully, understand? Yi Xian smiled and said, I understand. Yu Qi shook her head slightly, glib tongue. Saying this, she seemed to have thought of something and fell silent. Yi Xian said softly, are you worried about the Realm Protection Alliance? Yu Qi nodded. This time, the Realm Protection Alliance has mobilized their entire army. If they are allowed to obtain the origin heart of Qingzhou, forget it, let's not think about this. In short, after so many years of grievances, it is time to put an end to it. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. If things reach the worst situation, you leave, find a place to hide, and do not appear again, understand? Yi Xian was silent. He knew that the entire Blue Sword sect, including Yu Qi's master, had already prepared for the worst. A battle of life and death. At this time, Yu Qi suddenly patted his head. Did you hear that? Yi Xian grinned. I heard it. Saying this, he sat in front of Yu Qi and said seriously, Master Yu, can we discuss something? Yu Qi blinked. What? Yi Xian said seriously, there are so many swords in the sword tomb. Yu Qi shook her head. No, those swords are left there for the sect disciples to study. Moreover, many of the swords are the inheritance of some sect seniors. Don't touch them. Saying this, she paused slightly, then said, if one day we are no longer here, you can do whatever you want with them. Not here. Yi Xian was silent. After a moment, he said softly, how can we not be here? We must all live well. On the other side, above the clouds, Lu Xun glanced down. At this moment, the wasteland mountain range had completely collapsed, turning into a land of magma. Beside Lu Xun, Mo Xiu said in a low voice, the time should be right. Lu Xun nodded. Let them begin, draw out the origin heart. Mo Xiu nodded slightly, then turned and left. After a moment, a huge blood-red light curtain suddenly covered the entire wasteland, and within this light curtain, countless blood continuously soaked into the ground. In the clouds, Lu Xun and the others stared down, while around them, hundreds of thousands of true Imperial Law Realm experts were waiting for the origin heart to appear. Just like this, they waited and waited. Several hours passed, but there was no movement from the ground. Even at dawn the next day, there was still no movement. In the clouds, Lu Xun frowned deeply. What's going on? Beside him, Mo Xiu hesitated, then said, maybe there is not enough blood. After a moment of silence, Lu Xun said, then continue. Mo Xiu was a little hesitant. Lu Xun asked. Mo Xiu said in a low voice, this grand formation consumes too many spirit stones. We have already spent nearly 100,000 violet origin crystals. 100,000 violet origin crystals. Even if the Realm Defense Alliance was rich and overbearing, it still felt somewhat painful. Lu Xun was silent for a moment, then said, continue at all costs. Mo Xiu nodded, turned around, and left. Chapter 315. In the wasteland, countless drops of blood seeped into the earth every day. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or the Pale Sword Sect, they were all waiting for the Qingzhou Origin Heart to appear. Once it appeared, the war would begin. However, the Origin Heart didn't move at all. 2 days later, the faces of Supremacy Lu and the others sank. They had already noticed that something was wrong. High in the clouds, Supremacy Lu said, "Something's wrong." Emo Xio's face was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Supremacy Lu suddenly said, "Could it have been obtained by the Pale Sword Sect?" Emo Xio shook his head. "That's impossible. The Pale Sword Sect couldn't have obtained the Qingzhou Origin Heart without anyone knowing. You should know that without the support of the Grand Array, if the Origin Heart resists, it will cause the world's spiritual energy to fluctuate. Unless it willingly follows the Pale Sword Sect. However, that's impossible." Willingly follow? Supremacy Lu shook his head. He also felt that it was impossible. The Origin Heart was extremely wary of humans, so it was impossible for it to willingly follow them. After a moment of silence, Supremacy Lu said, "Let's go to the Divine Divination Sect and ask that old faker to help us." "Forget it, I'll go myself." With that he turned and left. Not long after, Supremacy Lu returned to the Central Divine Prefecture. He arrived at the top of a barren mountain. There was only a dilapidated palace on the mountain. Above the palace's entrance was a plaque with 3 words that were almost unrecognizable: Divine Divination Sect. Lu Xun walked into the hall. Inside the hall, there was an old man lying on the ground. This old man wore a loose gray robe, and his entire body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. Supremacy Lu walked in front of the old man and placed a wine bottle beside him. The old man immediately sat up and grabbed the bottle, drinking it in one gulp. A moment later, he lay back down in satisfaction. Supremacy Lu said, "I have a request." The old man waved his hand. "Old man Lu, if it's about divination, then don't mention it." Supremacy Lu said, "You must help me with this." The old man sat up and stared coldly at Lord Lu. "You should know why our divine fortune-telling sect ended up like this. It's because we divined the secrets of heaven and were punished by heaven." Supremacy Lu nodded slightly. "I naturally understand, but this time, it's very important to our Realm Defense Alliance. This is the last time. After this time, I will not come here again. Is that okay?" The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, "What is it?" High Lord Lu said in a deep voice, "The Green Province's Origin Heart." The old man shook his head. "You don't have to waste your efforts. The Origin Heart has already fallen into someone else's hands." Hearing this, Lord Lu's pupils shrank. "What do you mean?" The old man said indifferently, "What do you mean?" The Heart of Origin is no longer in the Green Province. It has fallen into the hands of someone else. Supremacy Lu glared at the old man. "How did you know?" The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, "Old man Lu, even though I don't know what your Realm Defense Alliance wants the Origin Heart for, but I'll say one more thing. The Origin Heart of Azure Continent can't be compared to the Origin Heart of Darkwave Continent. It is blessed by the heavens, so it's best if you don't have any designs on it." High Lord Lu's expression returned to calm. "Who has it?" The old man laughed bitterly. "Do you really think I'm so divine? If I was, then the divine fortune-telling sect wouldn't have fallen to such a state. All I know is that the Origin Heart isn't in the Green Province's Origin Heart. As for who has it, I really don't know." High Lord Lu spoke in a low voice. "Is there any way to find out?" The old man shook his head. "That person was able to sneak away with the Origin Heart under the noses of both your Realm Defense Alliance and the Pale Sword Sect. He is absolutely not an ordinary person." As he spoke, he lay down. "Old man Lu, I've told you everything I know. Let's go." Within the hall, High Lord Lu remained silent for a moment before he said, "It isn't in the hands of the Pale Sword Sect." The old man shook his head. "I don't know. I really don't know who has it. Old man Lu, you should be aware that our Tao of divination is only able to calculate a rough direction. As for the details, not to mention me, even the founding ancestor wouldn't be able to accomplish that." High Lord Lu glanced at the old man, and then he turned around and left. After High Lord Lu left, the old man sighed softly. Your Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to suffer. After High Lord Lu left the Central Divine Prefecture, he directly returned to Pine Prefecture. High above the clouds, High Lord Lu looked down at the desolate mountain range. At this moment, the grand formation around the mountain range had been withdrawn. Emo Xiao spoke in a low voice. Are you sure that the origin heart has been taken? High Lord Lu spoke softly. It should be true. The Pale Sword Sect? Asked Emo Xiao. High Lord Lu fell silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. It's impossible for them to seize the origin heart without making a sound. Moreover, if they obtained it, they would definitely destroy it. It's utterly impossible for them to dispatch all their experts to Pine Prefecture. Emo Xiao's brows knit together tightly. If it isn't the Pale Sword Sect, then who could it be? When he spoke up to here, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed. High Lord Lu gazed at Emo Xiao when he noticed the change in Emo Xiao's expression. What? Emo Xiao spoke in a low voice. I thought of something. High Lord Lu said, Speak. Emo Xiao's expression was slightly gloomy. Not long ago, I sensed the aura of the origin heart here, and I brought it here. However, when we arrived here, we didn't see the origin heart, and we only saw a person. Person? High Lord Lu frowned slightly. Who? Emo Xiao said, Yi Xian. Yi Xian. High Lord Lu's eyes instantly narrowed slightly when he heard this. Emo Xiao spoke in a low voice. We really did sense the aura of the origin heart that day, but we only saw Yi Xian when we arrived here. At that time, I thought that it was utterly impossible for Yi Xian to obtain the origin heart without making a sound. So, I felt that I might have sensed wrongly. But now it seems like... When he spoke up to here, he shook his head. That can't be right. Yi Xian is merely the Sword Emperor. It's utterly impossible for him to have taken away the origin heart. Not necessarily. High Lord Lu suddenly spoke coldly. This person has always been mysterious. If it was anyone else, then I would definitely not believe it. Even if it was the Pale Sword Sect, I wouldn't believe it. But I believe this person. Emo Xiao looked at High Lord Lu. High Lord, you think that it's very likely that the Azure Prefecture's origin heart is in Yi Xian's possession? High Lord Lu nodded. If you're not wrong, then it's very likely to be in his possession. Then where is Yi Xian now? Emo Xiao turned around to look at an old man, and the old man spoke in a low voice. He's with the Pale Sword Sect now. High Lord Lu spoke indifferently. Gather everyone and follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left, and over 30 true defense realm experts followed behind him. In next to no time, High Lord Lu led the members of the Realm Defense Alliance to a hill on the other side. At the top of the hill, Chen Beihan walked in front of High Lord Lu and smiled. High Lord Lu, why aren't you waiting for the birth of the origin heart? Why are you here? High Lord Lu glanced at Chen Beihan. Where's Yi Xian? Yi Xian? Chen Beihan smiled. Why is High Lord Lu looking for him? High Lord Lu replied indifferently. Just a question. Chen Beihan was about to speak when High Lord Lu suddenly interjected. Chen Beihan, I don't want to talk nonsense with you right now. I just want to see Yi Xian. Chen Beihan's smile gradually turned cold. At this time, a voice came from the side. High Lord Lu is looking for me? High Lord Lu turned around and saw a man walking over from not far away. It was Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian was a woman, Yu Qi. High Lord Lu's gaze fell on Yi Xian. Is the Azure Prefecture's origin heart with you? Azure Prefecture's origin heart? Hearing High Lord Lu's words, Chen Beihan and the others were slightly stunned. Even Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Origin heart? What origin heart? High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't play dumb in front of the old man. Is the origin heart with you or not? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. High Lord Lu, are you crazy? How can the origin heart be with me? Look at me. Do I look like someone with the origin heart? High Lord Lu was about to speak when Chen Beihan suddenly said, High Lord Lu, are you joking? High Lord Lu looked at Chen Beihan, his face extremely cold. Do you think I look like I'm joking? Chen Beihan smiled. Then do you think a mere Dharma-controlling realm like him can obtain the origin heart? If the origin heart is so easy to obtain, would your realm defense alliance go through so much effort? High Lord Lu looked at Yi Xian. He should know whether he obtained it or not. Yi Xian said seriously, High Lord Lu, the origin heart is with me. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. At this moment Yi Xian grinned. Lord Lu, I'm sure you want to hear this. So, I just said it to make you happy. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yu Qi shook his head and smiled, sly. Chen Beihan and the others also couldn't help laughing. At this time, High Lord Lu suddenly walked not far from Yi Xian. He stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, the origin heart is with you, right? Yi Xian said with a smile, It is with me. High Lord Lu narrowed his eyes. You admit it? Yi Xian smiled. You definitely wouldn't believe me if I said it isn't, so I can only say it is. High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he looked at Chen Beihan. My realm defense alliance is taking this person away. Taking him away. Just this one sentence caused the atmosphere to instantly become tense. Chen Beihan shook his head and smiled. High Lord Lu, you really know how to joke today. High Lord Lu looked Chen Beihan in the eye. I'm not joking with you. My realm defense alliance must take this person away today, and no one can stop us. Chen Beihan smiled. Then I can only say that you're overthinking it, High Lord Lu. Yi Xian is a disciple of my Pale Sword sect. So long as we old fellows are here today, you can forget about taking him away. High Lord Lu nodded slightly. Since that's the case, then let's fight. Chen Beihan smiled. Anytime. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. High Lord Lu, you haven't asked for my opinion before you want to take me away. High Lord Lu pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Cut the crap, I've been unhappy with you for a long time. Today, even if the person behind you appears, this old man will kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly charged at Yi Xian. Chapter 316. Yi Xian sneered at the sight of Lord Lu's attack. Just as he was about to make his move, Chen Beihan suddenly stood in front of him. Chen Beihan looked at Lu Xun with a cold smile. Lu Xun, aren't you ashamed to bully a junior? Let me play with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and pointed a finger at them. Swoosh! A flying sword flew out from his sleeve. It was so fast that Yi Xian couldn't catch the flying sword's trajectory. Sword immortal. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. Only a flying sword like this could be considered a real flying sword. Opposite Chen Beihan, Lu Xun waved his hand and a wave shield suddenly appeared in front of him. Boom! Heaven and earth suddenly trembled. Chen Beihan's flying sword was blocked. Chen Beihan glanced at the shield in front of Lu Xun and smiled. Come to think of it, this should be Lu Xun's Yuanin shield. Lu Xun glanced at Chen Beihan indifferently. Now, if your Pale Sword sect hands over Yi Xian, we can temporarily stop fighting. If your Pale Sword sect really wants to protect him, then you can accompany him in death. Chen Beihan smiled. Do you think I'm scared? Lu Xun narrowed his eyes. If that's the case, then accompany him in death. Dozens of people suddenly appeared in the surroundings. All of them were true Imperial Dharma realm. Behind Chen Beihan, 17 people also appeared. Among them, Yi Xian saw some familiar faces such as Zhan Tai, Gu Shishu, Yu Qi, Zhang Xian, and some he didn't know. However, these people were all true Imperial Dharma realm experts. Yi Xian's face sank because he didn't see great uncle Jian Xian. In the air, Lu Xun looked down at Chen Beihan. Come, let me see how much a great sword immortal has improved after so many years. Chen Beihan smiled. As you wish. He turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. Below, Yu Qi turned his head and glanced at Yi Xian not far away. Stand down. Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Yu Qi said, Stand down. This time, his voice was a little stern. Yi Xian grinned. All right. With that he turned around and left. In the sky, several experts of the Realm Protection Alliance directly chased after Yi Xian, but very quickly, Yu Qi and the others rose from the ground and directly blocked in front of them. The battle began. High above the clouds, Lord Lu and Qin Beihan looked at each other from afar, both expressionless. Supremacy Lu suddenly extended his right hand. In an instant, the clouds beneath him began to gather towards his palm. Not long after, a huge cloud vortex appeared beneath him. In the distance, Chen Beihan's right thumb, ring finger, and pinky suddenly bent. In the next moment, a sword howl resounded from within his sleeve. Supremacy Lu said coldly, "Come, let me see the sword in your sleeve." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly spread out his right hand. In the next moment, the huge cloud vortex suddenly shrank into a palm-sized vortex in the center of his palm. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly slapped his palm toward Qin Beihan, who was opposite him. As soon as his palm hit, the space within a radius of 1,000 zhang suddenly became illusory. At the same time, a huge cloud palm print shuttled through the sky. It was faster than lightning. Not only that, but wherever this cloud palm print passed, the space directly twisted into a twisted shape. Opposite Supremacy Lu, Chen Beihan suddenly pointed forward with a finger. From his sleeve, a sword suddenly flew out, and a sword light appeared. Thus, a sword howl suddenly resounded through the sky. At the same time, the sword light soared into the sky, and in an instant, this sword light directly covered the entire sky. Boom! A shocking explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and the space within a few thousand zhang trembled as if it was about to collapse. It was extremely terrifying. A true expert. Somewhere below, Yi Xian's blood was boiling as he watched. At this moment, he finally realized that Supremacy Lu was actually so strong, and with his current strength, it was impossible for him to go against Supremacy Lu. Moreover, it was the first time he'd seen such a battle. This kind of expert could really destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Although he'd seen the mysterious woman fight before, every time she attacked, it wasn't earth-shattering, and it was always a matter of a single move. Above the clouds, Qin Beihan glanced at the distant Supremacy Lu and said indifferently, "What a great move." Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. "After so many years, your sword in the sleeve has improved a lot." Qin Beihan smiled. "Then let's continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward. In an instant, over 100 energy swords suddenly appeared behind him. Qin Beihan pressed his fingers together and pointed at Supremacy Lu, "Go!" As soon as he spoke, the 100 energy swords shot out, and in an instant, the entire layer of clouds in the sky was instantly torn into pieces by the energy swords. At the same time, rays of dazzling sword light blotted out the sky and covered the entire horizon. On the other side, Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. He stretched out his right hand, and it didn't take long for an illusory shield to suddenly appear in his palm. In the next moment, the illusory shield expanded with the wind and instantly reached a height of over 100 zhang. Ripples kept appearing on the surface of this huge shield, like ripples on water. Soon, the energy sword slashed down. Boom, boom, boom. Deafening explosions resounded in the sky once more. At this moment, the clouds in the sky shook violently, and cracks even appeared in the space in some places. Just like that, the explosions continued for a very, very long time before the sky gradually calmed down. However, it wasn't long before more explosions resounded. Below, Yi Xian took a deep breath. An expert. At this moment, he deeply realized that he was actually still very weak. He hadn't realized this in the past because he hadn't seen the true experts of the firmament world. All this time, he had thought that he was very strong. In fact, he wasn't strong at all. At this moment, he was somewhat glad that he hadn't challenged Old Man Lu to a duel. Otherwise, he would definitely have been beaten to tears. However, he wouldn't belittle himself. He was still young. If he was given some time, let alone Supremacy Lu, he could even fight the mysterious woman. When he thought of this, Yi Xian was instantly filled with confidence. It was as if there was no one in this world that he, Yi Xian, couldn't defeat. In fact, he had no idea how strong the mysterious woman was. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian glanced at the prison pagoda. At this moment, Xiao Ling had run to the top of the pagoda. Xiao Ling seemed to be hugging a box. She was mumbling something to the box and seemed to be very happy. At this moment, Xiao Ling seemed to sense something. She hurriedly put away the box and glared at him. "Don't peek at me." Yi Xian. After a while, Yi Xian didn't bother with this little girl anymore. This little girl had been very mysterious lately. He would ask her when he was free in the future. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. There, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance were already fighting with Master Yu Qi and the others. Although the Pale Sword Sect had fewer people, Yi Xian discovered that the Pale Sword Sect's battle strength was extremely strong. They weren't at a disadvantage at all. Swordsmen. One had to know that swordsmen's battle strength had always been very strong. He had to do something. Yi Xian looked around and was about to make a move. At this moment, he seemed to think of something and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. In the distance, Yu Qi was fighting with 3 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts. Yu Qi wasn't just at the true Imperial Dharma Realm, he was also a sword immortal. For an expert like her, one true Imperial Dharma Realm expert couldn't possibly stand against her. 3 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts could only barely stand against her. At this moment, there was a sudden change. The true Imperial Dharma Realm expert on Yu Qi's left suddenly had a drastic change in expression. He turned around abruptly, and at this moment, a sword silently pierced through his throat. The true Imperial Dharma Realm expert's head flew straight into the air. Sensing this scene, the other 2 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts' expressions changed drastically as they retreated. The 2 looked around warily. There was no one around them. Soon, cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. At this moment, one of them suddenly turned around. However, there was nothing in front of him. This person clenched his fists tightly and said fiercely, "Who is it? Come out, old man." There was no response. At this moment, Yu Qi, who was not far away, suddenly drew his sword. The 2's expressions changed slightly as they hurriedly turned around. The moment they turned around, a sword silently pierced through the back of the old man who had just spoken. Fresh blood spurted out from the old man's neck. Chapter 317. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. The other old man looked around in horror. At this moment, his heart was already extremely shocked. Because the old man had died right beside him, but he hadn't discovered who had done it. It wasn't just him, even Yu Qi was slightly taken aback. Who was it? In her impression, the Blue Sword Sect did not have any assassins. And at this time, 100 zhang away, the head of a true defending magic realm expert of the Realm Protection Alliance suddenly flew off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. After a few breaths, 200 feet to the right, a true control Dharma Realm cultivator of the Realm Defense Alliance was pierced through the heart by a sword. Just like that, in less than a dozen breaths of time, 5 experts from the Realm Defense Alliance had perished. At this moment, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance panicked. They weren't afraid of fighting in the open, but they had to be afraid of this kind of dirty trick in the dark, because it was impossible to guard against. Furthermore, it was so mysterious. There was no trace of it at all. In next to no time, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance stopped in succession and moved closer to each other. At this moment, they didn't just have to face the experts of the Pale Sword Sect, they also had to be on guard against those hidden in the shadows. It could be said that they were too distracted, so their strength was greatly reduced. As a result, the Realm Protection Alliance was at a complete disadvantage. Seeing that the situation was not good, Mo Xiu hurriedly informed Supreme Lord Lu. However, he did not receive a reply. This was because Chen Beihan had pinned down Supremacy Lu. Neither of them dared to be distracted in their battle. One moment of carelessness and he would be consigned to eternal damnation. The members of the Pale Sword Sect were stunned as well because they didn't know who was helping them from the shadows. But it didn't matter, it was a good thing anyway. On the desolate mountain range, the battle was still ongoing. However, the Realm Defense Alliance was completely suppressed and could only passively defend. In the sky, the battle between Lord Lu and Qin Beihan was still going on, and there was still no clear winner. In the dark, Yi Xian did not attack again because the experts of the Realm Protection Alliance had already gathered together. If he were to attack now, they would definitely join hands to deal with him first. Now, he could only wait for the right opportunity. In any case, it was the Realm Protection Alliance that should be anxious. Just like that, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance died one after another. Although the Pale Sword sect had also sacrificed some people, it was far less than the Realm Defense Alliance. An hour later, a deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky above the clouds. Very quickly, two figures fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Boom! The entire ground shook violently, and the place where the two of them landed directly collapsed. Everyone stopped and looked at Lord Lu and Qin Beihan. If a victor was decided between the two of them, it would mean that the battle was about to end. On the ground, Qin Beihan waved his sleeves, then looked at Supremacy Lu, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Supremacy Lu, I'm afraid it won't take a few days and nights for us to fight to the death." Supremacy Lu stared fixedly at Qin Beihan with a malevolent expression. "If you don't hand over Yi Xian, I guarantee you that your Pale Sword sect will be annihilated." Qin Beihan smiled and said, "Your Realm Defense Alliance has been trying to destroy my Pale Sword sect for a long time. But my Pale Sword sect is still doing fine, isn't it?" Supremacy Lu sneered, "Qin Beihan, you will pay a painful price for your foolish actions." With that, he swept his eyes around. "Yi Xian, I know you're hiding in the dark. Let me tell you, if you don't hand over the Origin Heart, my Realm Defense Alliance will hunt you down for eternity. No one will be able to protect you." With that, he looked at Qin Beihan. "Just you wait." With that, the group of people turned and left. A moment later, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance disappeared into the horizon. Below, Qin Beihan looked up at the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. A moment later, he suddenly said, "Where's Yi Xian?" "I'm here." At this time, a voice suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was grinning, but no one knew what he was smiling about. Seeing Yi Xian, everyone shook their heads and smiled. This guy was really slippery at times. Yi Xian walked over to Qin Beihan and bowed slightly. "Sect leader." Qin Beihan nodded slightly. "Come with me." With that, he walked into the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Beside him, Yu Qi hesitated for a moment, but also followed. On a hill, Qin Beihan stared at Yi Xian. "Is the Origin Heart with you?" Yi Xian nodded. Seeing this, Yu Qi couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Qin Beihan's expression became slightly complicated. The Realm Defense Alliance went through so much trouble to obtain the Origin Heart, but I didn't expect it to fall into your hands in the end." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Fate." Qin Beihan hesitated for a moment, and then said, "I want to destroy this Origin Heart to avoid future troubles." "Destroy it?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No. At the thought of destroying Xiaoling, Yi Xian really couldn't bear to do it, but he couldn't do it. Although that girl was a bit mischievous, she wasn't a bad person. Qin Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. "If I don't destroy it, I'm afraid something big will happen in the future." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Sect leader, the Origin Heart is only willing to follow me because I promised to protect it. If I want to destroy it now, I can't do it. As a person, I have to be trustworthy, right?" Qin Beihan was silent for a moment, and then asked, "It followed you willingly?" Yi Xian nodded. Qin Beihan looked deeply at Yi Xian. Needless to say, he was still slightly shocked at this moment. Because he'd truly never imagined that the Qingzhou's Origin Heart would actually follow Yi Xian. It should be known that this kind of spiritual object, in general, was very resistant to humans. Mysterious. The feeling he got from Yi Xian had always been one of mystery. A short moment later, Qin Beihan spoke in a low voice. The Realm Defense Alliance should have guessed that it's you, and they won't let the matter rest. You must return to Pale Sword Sect with me. Yu Qi nodded, yes. Chen Beihan continued, if you stay in Qingzhou, then you won't be able to protect yourself at all. I'll give you half a day to deal with the matter in Qingzhou. It's best if you make those friends of yours go into hiding or return to Pale Sword Sect with me. When he spoke up to hear, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. For the sake of this origin heart, the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely do anything. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, if I go to Pale Sword Sect, then the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely act madly against Pale Sword Sect. This, Chen Beihan shook his head, you're already a disciple of my Pale Sword Sect, so your matters are naturally my Pale Sword Sect's matters. Moreover, even without you, once the Realm Defense Alliance achieves its objective, they still won't let my Pale Sword Sect off. Quickly go deal with your own matters, and we'll return to the Central Divine Prefecture in half a day. Yi Xian intended to say something else when Yu Qi suddenly said, quickly go. Don't waste any time. Yi Xian smiled, and then he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Chen Beihan spoke softly, I never expected that the origin heart would actually fall into his hands. Yu Qi gazed at Chen Beihan, don't use him. Chen Beihan shook his head and smiled, little junior sister, do you think your second senior brother, is such a heartless person in your heart? Yu Qi spoke softly, he isn't a bad person. If he's willing to stay in my Pale Sword Sect, then his accomplishments in the future wouldn't be inferior to eldest senior brothers. Chen Beihan nodded, I know. That kid's biggest problem is that he acts on impulse. If he doesn't manage the affairs of the sect and wholeheartedly cultivates, then his accomplishments in the future will definitely not be inferior to eldest senior brothers. But if he becomes the next sect master, then I'm afraid he'll lead the Pale Sword Sect to fight every day. Yu Qi shook her head slightly. She had a rough understanding of Yi Xian's character, and he really wasn't an ordinary kind of irritable person. Even though he usually laughed and laughed, was thick-skinned, and sometimes even schemed a little, but if he was infuriated, then he would erupt like a volcano. Chen Beihan suddenly said, forget it, these are matters for the future. It's too early to talk about it now. As he spoke, he looked at Yu Qi, do you know who attacked from the shadows earlier? Yu Qi shook her head. Chen Beihan nodded and didn't say anything. On the other hand, Yu Qi glanced in the direction that Yi Xian had left in. After leaving the desolate mountain range, Yi Xian returned to Ning Kingdom at the first possible moment. In Tuoba Yan's chamber. Tuoba Yan looked at Yi Xian and frowned slightly. Hide. Yi Xian nodded, both of you must. Otherwise, both of you can come with me to the Pale Sword Sect. Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji exchanged glances. In the end, Tuoba Yan spoke solemnly, is it very serious? Yi Xian nodded, very serious. The Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to fight me to the death this time. Just as Chen Beihan had said, he could sense how much the Realm Defense Alliance valued the origin heart. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance. Because even if he did, the Realm Defense Alliance wouldn't let him and the Pale Sword Sect off. Moreover, if he did hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance, then who knew what terrifying things the Realm Defense Alliance would use it to do. So, he and the Realm Defense Alliance were irreconcilable enemies now. Tuoba Yan fell silent for a moment, and then he said, I want to stay here. However, and Ji and I will go into hiding. Yi Xian spoke softly, you don't want to go to the Pale Sword Sect with me? Tuoba Yan shook his head, if we leave just like this, then what will happen to Ning Country? Even though I will have to hide if I stay here, I can manage Ning Country in secret. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded, alright. However, both of you must not show yourselves. Besides that, notify the others of Blue Waves Academy to not show themselves. Tuoba Yan looked at Yi Xian, you have to be careful, understand? Yi Xian smiled, don't worry, I won't die. As soon as he finished speaking, he hugged Tuoba Yan lightly, wait for me to return. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something, and he hugged Ji Anji once more before turning around and leaving. You will definitely return, right? Tuoba Yen asked. Yixian stopped and smiled. Wait for me. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished through the door. Within the hall, Tuoba Yen stared at the door for a long time and didn't leave. Half a day later, a huge event occurred in Firmament World. The Realm Defense Alliance declared war on the Pale Sword sect. Chapter 318. The Realm Defense Alliance had declared war on the Pale Sword sect. Before this, although the two families had already started fighting, they did not openly declare war on each other. But this time, the Realm Defense Alliance had declared war. This meant that both sides had no other choice but to fight to the death. As for Yi Xian, he followed Qin Beihan and the others back to the Pale Sword sect. At this moment, the Pale Sword sect had entered the highest level of alert. All the disciples were on standby. Because the Realm Defense Alliance could attack at any time. Yi Xian was helping Yu Qi tidy up the sword techniques and notes in the inner hall. What Yu Qi did every day was to study these sword techniques, make notes, and sometimes improve them. One had to admit that following Yu Qi really did allow one to learn many things every day. As for Yi Xian, he wasn't always at the Cloudy Sword Hall. The current him was already familiar with the Blue Sword sect. From time to time, he would stroll around here and there. Every day he was very carefree. But after returning to the Central Divine Continent, the Realm Defense Alliance was strangely calm, without the slightest movement. Realm Defense Mountain. High Lord Lu arrived at the rear hall. There was a black vortex in the rear hall, and within it was a boundless starry sky. High Lord Lu walked up to the vortex and bowed slightly. My lord. A moment later, a voice came from within. Failed. High Lord Lu nodded. Failed, but I know who has it. After a moment of silence, the voice suddenly said, At all costs, understand? High Lord Lu nodded slightly. I might need my lord's help when the time comes. There is a mysterious woman behind that person who once told my lord. She's no ordinary person. If she appears, didn't I give you a clone? The voice asked. High Lord Lu smiled bitterly. He wanted to say that this clone was far from enough, but he didn't dare say it. After hesitating for a moment, High Lord Lu nodded. Understood, but I'm worried that the mysterious woman isn't ordinary and has some other power behind her. So, just in case, I ask my lord to give me another clone. The voice said, I've only managed to cultivate 2 clones. I've given one to you, but I have other uses for the other one. If you don't have the confidence, I'll let my left and right protectors come and assist you. Hearing this, Lord Lu quickly nodded. That's great. Apart from that, I would also like to request for a group of golden guards. I only need 10 of them. After a moment of silence, the voice said, Approved. Supremacy Lu heaved a sigh of relief. This way, the Grey Mia Sword sect would be more confident. In the endless starry sky, a star cloud ship suddenly stopped. Not far away from this star cloud ship was an ancient city, and in the sky above the ancient city, there were 3 large words, Realm Defense Alliance. On the Nebula warship stood an old man and a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man glanced at the ancient city in the distance and said softly, This star field is under the control of the Realm Protection Alliance? The old man nodded. This Realm Protection Alliance was not simple in the past. Its founder was just an ordinary young man, but he created a new cultivation method. This method was the power of faith. The more devout the people's faith in him, the stronger his martial Dao was. Unfortunately, saying this, he shook his head and sighed. After that person, no other amazing talent appeared in the Realm Protection Alliance. As a result, its power is not as great as before. Now, it can only be considered a third-rate faction. The middle-aged man smiled. This has nothing to do with us. Our mission this time is to find that young man. AI, to find a person in this vast star field is more than 100 times harder than finding a needle in a haystack. Our Spirit Void Star Palace is really unlucky this time. Hearing this, the old man smiled bitterly. There's nothing we can do. That mysterious woman descended from the sky and found us. Who told us that we can't beat her? Hearing the old man's words, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly. They couldn't beat her. They couldn't beat her at all. That mysterious woman's strength had completely exceeded their understanding. A moment later, the middle-aged man said softly, "Let's go." As his voice sounded out, the Star Cloud ship flew above the Realm Protection City. Soon, a black-clothed old man appeared before the Star Cloud ship. The black-clothed old man looked warily at the middle-aged man and the old man. "You two are?" The middle-aged man smiled. "I am Spirit Void Star Palace's Lin Songyun. This is my Spirit Void Star Palace's enforcer, Xianxia." Spirit Void Star Palace? The black-clothed old man frowned deeply. "I've never heard of it." Lin Songyun smiled. "My Spirit Void Star Palace is too far from this star field. It's normal that you have never heard of it." As he spoke, he released his powerful aura. Beside him, Xianxia also released his aura. Seeing the two's auras, the black-clothed old man's expression changed. "You too," Lin Songyun smiled. "We have no ill intentions. We just want to ask your Realm Protection Alliance for a small favor." "A small favor?" The black-clothed old man hesitated for a moment before saying, "What favor?" Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "To find someone." As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a portrait appeared in front of the black-clothed old man. If Yi Xian was here, he would definitely be shocked because the person in the portrait looked exactly like him. The black-clothed old man said in a low voice, "Do you have an exact location?" Lin Songyun shook his head. Hearing this, the black-clothed old man shook his head. "It's too difficult." Lin Songyun smiled bitterly. "The two of us know that it's too difficult, but there's nothing we can do about it. This person is extremely important to my Spirit Void Star Palace. Please help us." The black-clothed old man glanced at the two of them. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I will send people to search. However, the old man cannot guarantee that he will definitely be found." Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." As he spoke, he looked down. "The two of us would like to stay here for a period of time. Is that convenient?" The black-clothed old man smiled. "Of course." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "My Realm Defense Alliance is about to go to war with another power. If it's convenient for the two of you, I hope that you can lend us a hand. What do you think?" Lin Songyun and Lin Songyun looked at each other. Lin Songyun smiled. "Of course. However, the matter of finding someone," the black-clothed old man said seriously, "don't worry. My Realm Defense Alliance will do its best to find that person. If that person is in this star region, then my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely be able to find him." Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." The black-clothed old man smiled lightly. "Please follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and left. His face was filled with a smile. Lin Songyun and Xianxia were obviously not ordinary experts. When the two of them participated in the battle, the Firmament Sword sect would definitely be destroyed. When he thought of this, the black-clothed old man's smile grew even brighter, and he became even more courteous towards Lin Songyun and Xianxia. The Firmament World. Yi Xian strolled around here and there every day. In the end, he arrived at the Sword Tomb. When the old man who guarded the Sword Tomb saw Yi Xian, his eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly stood in front of Yi Xian and said cautiously, "What are you doing?" He hadn't forgotten that Yi Xian had devoured many swords when he came here, and there were even heaven-grade swords among them. This fellow can devour swords. Yi Xian chuckled. "Nothing, I'm just here to stroll around." The old man said indifferently, "There's nothing to stroll around here." "Go back." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm just going in for a stroll. I have no other intentions." The old man glanced at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. Yi Xian sighed softly. He had no choice but to turn around and leave. Actually, he could sneak in silently, but it would be too boring to do that. Heaven-grade swords. What he needed the most right now was a heaven-grade sword. As long as he had a heaven-grade sword, he could enter the true defense realm at any time. Once he entered the true defense realm, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Other than that, he had yet to condense the Sword of Space. Other than the World Prison Pagoda, his strongest attack was the Sword of Earth. If he could successfully condense the Sword of Earth and use life and death in one sword, he was 90% confident that he could instantly kill a true defense realm powerhouse. The Tao of Space was clearly above the Tao of Earth. If he could condense the Sword of Space, it would definitely be even more powerful. But now, he wasn't confident that he could condense the Sword of Space, because his cultivation level wasn't high enough. He had to reach the true defense realm. And he needed swords. Where could he find swords? The sword tomb was out of the question. This was because this place was the accumulation of the Pale Sword sect. If those swords were left there, they could improve the swordsmanship of the Pale Sword sect disciples. He definitely couldn't let him continue devouring. He had to think of something else. Who was he thinking of? Yixian thought for a moment. Soon he came to Weapon Forging Peak. Sword Dao Yixian. Xianxia said impatiently, "What are you doing here again?" Yixian grinned. "I'm here to pay my respects to Uncle Master Zhan." Scram. Xianxia waved his hand. "Scram quickly, I have nothing here." After he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared on the spot. Yixian. A moment later, Yixian came to Array Dao Peak. Inside the hall, Yixian walked to Uncle Master Gu and bowed. "Greetings, Uncle Master Gu." Uncle Master Gu glanced at Yixian. "What's the matter?" Yixian hesitated. "There's something, but it's a little hard to say." Uncle Master Gu said indifferently, "Then don't say it." Yixian's face darkened. Why didn't this Uncle Master Gu play by the rules? After hesitating for a moment, he said, "I want a heaven-grade sword." Uncle Master Gu glanced at him. "There's only one. I'll use it myself. Do you want it?" Yixian smiled bitterly. How could he want it? He bowed slightly, then turned and left. At this moment, Uncle Master Gu suddenly said, "Go find your master, she has a way." Yixian was stunned, then he hurriedly flew out of the hall. Soon, he returned to Cloud Sword Peak. In the hall, Yuqi was silent for a moment, then she turned and walked into the inner hall. After a while, she walked out again, waved her right hand, and two swords landed steadily in front of him. Heaven-grade sword. Yixian was stunned, then he said embarrassedly, Still, isn't it enough?" Yuqi asked. Yixian hurriedly nodded. He could be thick-skinned to everyone, but when it came to Yuqi, he really couldn't be thick-skinned. Yuqi was silent for a moment, then she said, "Follow me." After saying that, she brought Yixian to the sword tomb. Seeing Yixian, the old guard of the sword tomb was stunned, but he ignored Yixian and looked at Yuqi with a somewhat kind expression. "Little junior sister, why are you here today?" Yuqi said indifferently, "Give me a few heaven-grade swords." The old man glanced at Yixian, a little hesitant. "Is there a problem?" Yuqi asked. The old man hurriedly said, "No problem, I'll go get it for you." After saying that, he turned and left. At the side, Yixian was dumbfounded. P.S. Actually, I know many people have been dissatisfied recently because there are fewer updates. But, to be honest, everyone has a holiday for the new year, but what we write really doesn't have a holiday. It's year-round, it's not an excuse, I just want to explain to my friends who understand. After all, it's the new year, and I'm still in the hospital, now waiting for my father's wound to heal. I don't know how long it will take. If you can understand, then understand, but if you can't, then scold. Thank you. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.